gradually starting to push its way in from the west. As a result, we could see some outbreaks of rain across parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland as we go through Saturday night into Sunday. Otherwise, and there'll be perhaps a bit more cloud than we've seen through some recent nights, so temperatures not falling quite as low as they have done recently. As we look through Sunday then, and yes, we'll have some outbreaks of rain towards the far west, northwest of the UK. Otherwise, for many, it is going to again be a generally dry day. Yes, there'll be more cloud around than recently, but I am still expecting some decent sunshine and temperatures similar to of late, so still feeling pleasantly warm for most. There is then more unsettled weather to come later in the weekend.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a very good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here on GB News. Happy Good Friday. I'll be with you 3 till 6 p.m. Here's what I've got for you this hour. Labour are in massively hot water over a shameful tweet about Rishi Sunak. I'll fill you in on that in just a moment. And get a load of this. Do you think that there are too many foreign doctors? Are we not importing enough, or creating enough, I should say, of our own? Why is that? Does that bother you? If so, why? And King Charles has not ruled out paying slavery reparations. I can tell you what, that was going to have to come out of his own purse. I'm certainly not going to be paying anything. What about you? And yes, a lighter one to end with. That's right. It's an Easter extravaganza, this. I mean, who came up with that, hey? But there we go. I will be doing a live taste test of Easter eggs right here on this show. I mean, who said it was a hard life for me, hey? All that coming your way and much more. I was absolutely adamant about doing that Easter egg tasting. Anyway, right, get your views coming in, gbviews at gbnews.uk. What do you make of that Labour tweet that basically said that Rishi Sunak doesn't care about prosecuting child sex abusers? I think that was absolutely savage, wasn't it? gbviews at gbnews.uk. Get all that coming in. But right now, here's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you very much and good afternoon. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The firm which audits the accounts of the Scottish National Party has resigned. Accountancy firm Johnson Carmichael have made the decision after reviewing its client portfolio. It follows Nicola Sturgeon's husband, former SNP Chief Executive Peter Murrell, being released without charge. He was arrested as part of a probe into SNP finances. Well, the SNP says Johnson Carmichael will not be providing its audit services this year. Police in Northern Ireland are warning their officers could be targeted by dissidents in Londonderry this Easter. That's ahead of a state visit by US President Joe Biden, who's arriving in Belfast on Tuesday. The PSNI says it's received strong intelligence attacks are being planned for Bank Holiday Monday. MI5 raised the terrorism threat level in the country to severe following the shooting of senior detective John Caldwell. Well, political commentator Nigel Nelson told us Northern Ireland has seen relative peace over a quarter of a century, showing what an achievement the agreement was.
When it comes to Republican supporters, there are probably about as many in Northern Ireland now as there were during the Troubles. The new IRA doesn't have the capability of, say, launching mainland attacks. But they're obviously, as we can see by the various attacks they've carried out in Northern Ireland, they're hugely dangerous. So, yes, it is a tricky time, but it's a lot better than it was 25 years ago.
The Labour Party has stood by an ad claiming that Rishi Sunak doesn't think child sex abusers should go to prison. The advert posted on Twitter has drawn criticism from MPs. Senior Tory ministers accuse the party of a vile and desperate campaign strategy. Labour posted the ad pitching itself as the party of law and order. But Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell told GB News it's similar to the types of graphics the PM uses.
The digital graphic that's based on, it's like a skit if you like, or a take on the types of graphics that the Prime Minister himself produces about his own policies, and he's become famous for producing these kind of graphics. And so it's a take on that. If it's personal in the sense that he's the guy who runs the country, he is the Prime Minister, and the book does stop with him.
A 16-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a 14-year-old girl died in a fire at a block of flats in East London yesterday. The girl, named locally as Tiffany, died at the scene and 5 others were also injured, but they've since been discharged from hospital. Emergency services were called to the scene in Newham around 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon. The fire is being investigated as suspected arson. A 12-year-old boy has been charged with the murder of a woman who died after being hit by a car. 60-year-old Marcia Grant was hit by the car in the Greenhill area of Sheffield on Wednesday evening. South Yorkshire Police have said the boy, who cannot be identified for legal reasons, will appear before Sheffield Youth Court tomorrow. 2 million British holidaymakers are expected to head overseas this Easter weekend. Meanwhile, the Port of Dover is warning those travelling could face 2-hour delays. Ferry operator DFDS urged travellers to allow 120 minutes to complete border controls and check-ins. Delays have been blamed on French officials carrying out extra checks, as well as stamping UK passports following Brexit. 2 Israeli women have been shot in an attack on their car in the occupied West Bank following a day of violence along the Lebanese and Gaza borders. An Israeli army video shows explosions on Hamas weapon production sites and tunnels in retaliation for rocket attacks it blamed on the Islamist group. It comes amid mounting confrontation in Jerusalem during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, as well as the Jewish Passover holiday. The UK has appealed for de-escalation, with Foreign Secretary James Cleverly saying both sides need to negotiate. And Easter Sunday could be the warmest day of the year so far, with highs of up to 18 degrees. Temperatures could top 16 or 17 degrees today in some parts of the UK as the sun puts its hat on for Easter. The Met Office says the weather's set to be fine and relatively nice this weekend before rain for most places on Bank Holiday Monday. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Patrick.
Yes, welcome along, everybody. Now, we start with the huge row caused by a controversial tweet by Labour which says that Rishi Sunak doesn't think paedophiles should be jailed. It's been branded appalling, nauseating and shameful by MPs from other parties, but a shadow cabinet minister has refused to criticise the tweet. GB News viewers can see the social media post now, which has an image of a smiling Rishi Sunak next to the message, "Do you think adults convicted of sexually assaulting children should go to prison? Rishi Sunak doesn't." So there we go. The tweet says that under Tory rule, 4,500 adults convicted of child sexual assault have avoided jail. But this morning, Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell told GB News that she stood by the message despite massive calls to delete it, even from within their own party. And she tried to shed a bit of light, I think, on what the post was allegedly trying to highlight.
Well, look, it's a graphic, a digital campaigning graphic. I didn't design it. I didn't, put it up there. But it's a digital graphic that's based on, it's like a skit, if you like, or a take on the types of graphics that the Prime Minister himself produces about his own policies, and he's become famous for producing these kind of graphics. And so it's a take on that. What we are highlighting is that under the Conservative government, of which he is the Conservative Prime Minister of that government, we are seeing now a situation where custodial sentences are not being given to serious offenders where they should be because the system can't cope with it. And he is responsible for that, and he is accountable for that, and he has questions.
Yeah, so Lucy Powell there wouldn't criticise the post, but Twitter took the very rare step of putting a fact check next to the tweet there. So there we go. Twitter, of course, are pretty adamant there. It says, the tweet implies that the PM, Rishi Sunak, doesn't support prison sentences for sexual assaults against children. The current sentencing guidelines for this crime has a maximum sentence of 14 years in prison. There is no Conservative Party policy that plans to remove this. Do you find this helpful? Yes, I did, Twitter. Thank you very much. OK, now, for more on this, I'm joined by GB News' political reporter, Catherine Forster. Catherine, this has been accused of being gutter politics.
Well, it has, hasn't it? And I think clearly they are saying that Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, doesn't think that effectively paedophiles should be in jail. I don't think many people, even if you're a critic of Rishi Sunak, would honestly believe for a minute that Rishi Sunak didn't think these people would be in jail. Yeah. Also, these are figures going back to 2010. He wasn't even in Parliament till 2015. He wasn't Prime Minister until 6 months ago. Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions. But so Labour are sticking... Yeah, but Labour are sticking to this. They're absolutely doubling down. Lucy Powell was on this morning, as you showed. She seemed to be uncomfortable. She clearly realised that not everybody would like this, but they're trying to highlight the message. But of course, what they're doing is they're trying to focus on what they see as the Conservative Party's failures over 13 years. And this is all prior to the local elections. And both Tories and Labour are fighting on crime. Rishi Sunak saying, look what we're doing on antisocial behaviour, look what we're doing on grooming gangs, and Labour going, look how the Conservatives have failed over 13 years on this and this.
I've got a tweet here right in front of me from the Labour Party. This came live 10 minutes ago, so I'm just going to read it out, everyone, now. So it says, 13 years of Tory failure has broken our justice system. Victims wait months, if not years, for justice, while dangerous criminals avoid prison. Labour will prevent crime, punish criminals, protect communities. They have doubled down on this. Do you think it's a similar graphic? Do you think an adult convicted of possessing a gun with intent to harm should go to prison? It then says Rishi Sunak doesn't. Under the Tories, 937 adults convicted of possession of a firearm with intent to harm serve no prison time. I mean, is this stuff borderline defamatory?
You would think so, wouldn't you? But apparently they have been taking advice from the Australian Labor Party and from the Democrats in the States about how to win an election, whether it's seats in the local election or the general election sometime next year. And they've been told basically to fight as viciously as the Conservatives. Now, there's been lots of criticism of Keir Starmer being very dull, and he's always talking about decency in politics. They seem to have taken a big swerve away from that. But of course, back in 2019, when the Conservatives won that 80-seat majority, in that election campaign, there were lots of attack ads from the Conservatives that were very dubious with the facts, shall we say. There was a huge hoo-ha at the time, but they were very, very effective, and Boris Johnson got a big majority off the back of it. So the gloves are certainly coming off.
They are. Look, Catherine, thank you very much. Catherine Forster there, our political reporter. We'll bring you the latest as we get it. The Labour Party doubling down. There was a tweet that basically said that Rishi Sunak didn't mind about paedophiles going to prison, and now about people who possess a firearm with intent to harm going to prison. Clearly, Rishi Sunak will deny all of these things. Joining me now, though, is the political commentator Stephen Carlton-Woods. And, Stephen, thank you for this. This is like watching the Labour Party morph into Trump, isn't it?
Oh, it's unbelievable, really. It just shows you the quality of the people behind the scenes with Labour. And can the country really trust an organisation like this? I was very impressed with Stephen Dixon this morning with his interview with Lucy Powell, because he wasn't letting it go, and he sort of pointed out this is obviously lies, and you're endorsing it in a way. And Lucy Powell really couldn't get away from that. She didn't turn around and say it wasn't lies, but she was, squirming for an angle and was not comfortable with it at all.
Stephen, have Labour now lost the argument when it comes to talking about, the Tories have been dragging us into the gutter, or people are out there pumping out extreme rhetoric that's just designed to rabble, rouse and divide people? Well, all right, I'm sorry, but apparently it's fair game now.
Well, there's a few points to this, and Labour always have this situation where they blame everyone else but themselves for everything that goes on. We've got the local Trafford Council that's now Labour controlled, and since they've got to power, they've never gone on about their successes or what they may have done. It's always about the Conservative government, and they can't do the job properly. I hear Manchester City Council do the same thing. But when we look back at this, when you think about the angle what Labour's done with this tweet, just remember Keir Starmer was on the Sentencing Council that sets the sentencing guidance on sexual assault on children. It wasn't that. It was in 2014, Patricia Hewitt, who was a high profile within the Labour Party, made a statement saying it's okay to have sex with 10-year-olds. If they're going to come out with this sort of rhetoric, they need to look at themselves first before start pointing the finger at the Conservative Party, which is, by the way, completely untrue.
Well, the thing is, it is untrue, because the idea that Rishi Sunak doesn't think that paedophiles should go to prison, it is clearly untrue, demonstrably untrue. The idea that he doesn't think that people who have firearms with intent to use them should go to prison is, again, just untrue. So it is a lie. It is a lie. And also, there's one word that keeps coming up in my inbox right now, and that word is Rotherham. And I just wonder whether or not the Labour Party, with Keir Starmer, who was, of course, in a position to have done things about prosecuting people for a very long time, have maybe created a bit of an open goal here that the Conservative Party can run headlong through with some of their own tweets.
Well, it doesn't end really, Patrick. It wasn't so long ago that Labour voted against longer sentences for child abusers and murderers. And then a few months later, they're putting out tweets like this saying that Rishi doesn't want to lock them up. It's unbelievable, really.
OK. And, I mean, look, just lastly, though, from a journalistic perspective, this kind of stuff sticks. And this is what we all know to be true, OK? So you lob things out there like that, and that stuff sticks. And Trump has done it. Trump did it with tremendous effect about Clinton. He's now calling people like Stormy Daniels horseface and sleepy Joe Biden and all of this stuff. That kind of stuff does actually resonate with the public. And so if people are looking out there now, it will almost be, saying that Rishi Sunak doesn't care about paedophilia. That kind of stuff will resonate with people, even though it's a lie.
Well, it all depends on what newspapers people read. And, having a short conversation with certain people, you can sort of guess what newspapers they read. But one thing that really frustrates me in the UK is people trying to measure the UK against US politics. It's a very different animal. And we did have certain courtesies in this country, but that seems to have gone out the window with what's gone on in the last 24 hours. But something else that's quite important now, even our mainstream media have picked up on this, and I thought they might try and brush it under the carpet. But do you think this could be serious enough now for people to demand the resignation of Sir Keir Starmer?
Do you think this is so serious, though, that Keir Starmer should resign over this kind of targeted advertising?
It depends if the media, the mainstream media, has got any appetite for this. We certainly didn't have any appetite for it with Beergate, but that may be because the Police and Crime Commissioner was at the same party as Sir Keir Starmer, so that didn't go any further.
I am fascinated by that. I am fascinated by numerous things, actually. Like Beergate, I, for the life of me, do not quite understand what the absolutely massive difference was between that and a couple of things that went on in Downing Street. I also am absolutely staggered. Can you imagine if Carrie Johnson, for example, had her house raided and the garden being dug up and the police looking at whether or not there was some kind of expenses issue going on there or whatever? That would be on the front of literally every single newspaper, wouldn't it? It doesn't seem to be taking place with that, does it? So there we go. Look, Stephen, thank you very much. Stephen Carlton Woods there. All right, who is a political commentator. Now, look, I just want to turn your heads towards a couple of bits and bobs that we're going to be talking about later. Massive day for Northern Ireland. Big period of time coming up for Northern Ireland, actually. Of course, the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. We'll be going there shortly. Joe Biden will also be there in the coming days as well. Concerningly, though, some noises coming out that we saw the terror threat raised to its maximum level about a week ago, and some serious intelligence that they are expecting, or worried about anyway, some potential attacks there, some potential for violence. So we'll be talking about all of that. I've got a couple of others coming your way, though, as well. Could King Charles, actually have opened the door for himself, and with it possibly all of us as taxpayers, to end up paying reparations to some Commonwealth countries for the slave trade? We predicted this a bit yesterday, right here on this show, and thank you everyone who emailed in about this, because we called it right. We said, when he welcomes an investigation into the historic links with the slave trade and the monarchy, well, then that's one thing, but people don't stop there. The next step will be reparations, and it's already here. Could Charles now be forced to personally pay slave reparations? He's apparently not ruling it out, and this will be the next step of it. I want to know from you whether or not you actually will be willing to pay anything yourself, because the possibility is, if our monarch does, then will that not be taxpayers' money? I want to know what you think about all of this. GBViews at gbnews.uk. We called it yesterday. We said people will not stop once you open the door for investigations into this kind of stuff, which, by the way, seemed to centre around a note from the 1600s, in which King William III managed to receive around £1,000 worth of shares from Edward Colston, who was, of course, a notorious slave trader. We opened the door to that kind of stuff, and then now, all of a sudden, it's going to move on to, well, shouldn't we all be paying reparations for the slave trade? And I just think King Charles needs to stand up and say, no, absolutely not, especially if it involves our money. Anyway, here's a worrying story. Police in Northern Ireland have warned that dissidents could launch attacks on their officers in Londonderry on Easter Monday, and we'll be going to that next. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Loads coming your way. But first, police in Northern Ireland have warned that dissidents could attack their officers in Londonderry on Monday, which is the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Assistant Chief Constable Bobby Singleton said the force has received strong intelligence that dissidents are planning to launch terror attacks. Tony Blair and Bertie Ahern were among the people who signed the Good Friday Agreement on April the 10th, 1998. Joe Biden, though, is due to mark the occasion by visiting Belfast on Tuesday. The warning comes less than a fortnight after the terrorism threat level in Northern Ireland was raised from substantial to severe. For more on this now, I'm joined by GB News' Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie, who's outside Stormont. Doogie, thank you very much. Yes, look, very concerning news yet again. The police say they've got some serious intelligence.
Well, it does sound concerning, but really this serious intelligence is a warning to the terrorists. We know what you're at. We know what you're going to do. You're going to try and lure us into civil disturbance somewhere in and around the Crick area of Derry, Londonderry. And of course, that goes on most Easter Mondays. Easter Sunday is the official Easter Rising Parade that is ran by many of the Republican genuine outfits. And then on the Monday is the Dissidents Parade, and it usually ends up in civil disturbance, but of course that has now, the terror threat has increased there, and the police are saying that they know that they're going to be lured into a trap. So basically what they're saying, the dissidents, is look, we know what you're doing, we will not respond unless things get really bad in there, and then when they do go in, they will be able to say, well, we went in with very heavy force and it was justified in doing so. So this is a pretty clear warning. The 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, of course, is on Monday. Joe Biden's here on Wednesday. But Arlene Foster was speaking earlier on about what it was like before the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement.
We still have dissident Republican terrorists here who are threatening what we have here in Northern Ireland at the moment, and undoubtedly we have had a period of peace, relative peace, and our children have been able to go about their business in the normal way, which is not something that I enjoyed when I was growing up in the 1970s and 1980s. And as a daughter of a police officer, it was a difficult time, Mark, and I think we all give thanks that we're not back in the 70s and 80s, but undoubtedly there are still residual issues to be dealt with. And Bertie Ahern talks about those issues in the interview which he gave to me.
Well, you can hear from Arlene. She talks about the past there. Arlene and I are of similar age groups. And yes, I went through similar experiences. In fact, many of the people I went to school with are no longer with us because of the Troubles. And in fact, in my job in the media, I filmed some very heartbreaking scenes indeed and reported on some as well. And they will never, ever leave me. And today I'm standing here. There are tourists all around. They're walking up and down. They're examining every piece of this beautiful estate that is Stormont. And of course, behind us, the government isn't sitting, and that's because the Good Friday Agreement is in trouble because it was based on consent, and of course the protocol and now the Windsor framework has walked straight through that consent, and unionists are refusing to sit here while their laws are going to be made in Europe.
Yeah, Doogie, thank you very much. Doogie BT there, our Northern Ireland reporter from Stormont. Well, you just heard there, in that package from Doogie, Arlene Foster referred to her interview with Bertie Ahern ahead of the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Now, Ahern was the Prime Minister of Ireland who helped to broker the peace deal. He's urged all sides to work together. Well, unfortunately, there's a little technical issue with that. Of course, there isn't there? But there we go. You can see that full interview, which is probably just about worthwhile listening and watching. It's Bertie Ahern there on the Camilla Tominay Show from 9:30 on Sunday morning, right here on GB News. I'm just going to go into the inbox now because I've got a few emails coming in. So get those coming in. Now, loads of stuff coming your way, actually, and things I think that might get you going a little bit. So King Charles, yesterday, we were talking about, weren't we? He welcomed an investigation into slavery and reparations, etc. Well, we said, didn't we, that this would end up inevitably leading to people wanting more. It was a little bit like with the climate activists. You kind of give an inch and they take a mile. And now, lo and behold, he's been forced into a situation where he said that he won't rule out potentially paying reparations for the slave trade. And then it got me thinking, well, who's paying these reparations? Is it you and me? Is it our taxpayers' money? What's going on? And indeed, now, former Tory MP Harvey Proctor, who's been on this channel quite a few times, has called for any reparations to be paid by Charles personally and not by taxpayers. And I wanted to know what you all thought about all of this. And Mark has been on. Patrick, I absolutely wouldn't pay anything for the slave trade. It's nothing to do with me. It's nothing to do with any of my ancestors, and I will not have any about it at all. How about taxing people more, says Liz, in order to be able to pay for it? No, I don't think so, and that's not going to work, is it? Basically saying, where on earth would this money come from? And there are massive question marks as to whether or not Britain actually really owes any debt whatsoever. This is something I'm going to be talking about a bit later on in the show. Whether or not Britain actually owes any debt whatsoever, because we paid in a lot of blood and with a lot of money for the stoppage of the slave trade, didn't we? Absolutely. Visit not the sins of the father, says Rob. Again, who is really responsible when it comes to this stuff? And I am worried now that King Charles, who wants to see himself, I think, as somewhat of a progressive monarch, which maybe that seems like a bit of an oxymoron for people, but a bit of a progressive monarch. We know how he is, of course, with the climate reparations and the climate issues that are taking place there. If he finds himself wandering into a situation now where he's just giving in to people left, right and centre and giving into the woke mob, I think that will be, frankly, quite a bad thing to do. Look, keep all your views coming in. It's frankly got absolutely wild in the inbox about the old slave trade reparations. No way should the taxpayer be paying any reparations for the slave trade. Ancestors of these slaves have now in this country had a better standard of living than they may well have had. That's from Brian, so there we go, and lots of reaction as well to the Labour tweets. I'll be talking about all of that. I'm also going to be talking as well a little bit more, aren't I, about what's been going on in Northern Ireland, as well as we look forward there to the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, and get a load of this as well. There's still got loads more coming your way between now and 4 o'clock. We'll get reactions to calls to the royal family to pay the reparations, like I've said, and there's the latest on the travel chaos that's affecting people all over the country this bank holiday weekend, although I am reliably informed that we might have a little bit of good news for you there. So, fingers crossed, eh? But first, it is time for your latest headlines with the wonderful Tatiana Sanchez.
Good afternoon. It's 3:30. I'm Tatiana Sanchez with your latest headlines. The firm which audits the accounts of the Scottish National Party has resigned. Accountancy firm Johnston Carmichael have made the decision after reviewing its client portfolio. It follows Nicola Sturgeon's husband, former SNP Chief Executive Peter Murrell, being released without charge. He was arrested as part of a probe into SNP finances. Police in Northern Ireland are warning their officers could be targeted by dissidents in Londonderry this Easter. That's ahead of a state visit by US President Joe Biden, who's arriving in Belfast on Tuesday. The PSNI says it's received strong intelligence attacks are being planned for Bank Holiday Monday. MI5 raised the terrorism threat level in the country to severe following the shooting of senior detective John Caldwell. The Labour Party has stood by an ad claiming that Rishi Sunak doesn't think child sex abusers should go to prison. The advert posted on Twitter has drawn criticism from MPs. Senior Tory ministers accuse the party of a vile and desperate campaign strategy. A 16-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a 14-year-old girl died in a fire at a block of flats in East London yesterday. The girl, named locally as Tiffany, died at the scene. 5 others were injured but have since been discharged from hospital. Emergency services were called to the scene in Newham around 5:30 yesterday afternoon. The fire is being investigated as suspected arson. And Easter Sunday could be the warmest day of the year so far, with highs of up to 18 degrees. Temperatures could top 16 or 17 degrees today in some parts of the UK as the sun puts its hat on for Easter. The Met Office says the weather's set to be fine and relatively nice this weekend before rain for most places on Bank Holiday Monday. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's back to Patrick.
OK, welcome back. Now, yesterday, I covered the news that the royal family had agreed to cooperate with research into the historical links between the British monarchy and the transatlantic slave trade. I said at the time that people would jump on this bandwagon now, and sure enough, they have. The National Reparations Commission of Grenada wants the royals to hold talks about paying reparations. And mark my words, this will not be the end of it at all. And The Guardian are going big now, and as far as I can tell, is just a non-stop takedown of the royal family, pretty much. You know, documents that led to the King's research backlash into slavery links. You'd think this was last week. It's from the 1600s. You've got connections with them, colonial loot, archive shows Indian treasures in the royal collection. Let's talk as well about the Queen, our dear Queen, receiving gifts of horses from various different Saudis, etc. I mean, look, honestly, it's absolutely shocking. What is their game just ahead of the coronation? And people are jumping on the bandwagon of this. And no question in my mind whatsoever that there's going to end up being calls for reparations to be paid. And this is going to end up being... Because I think Charles might well give in to this, because I'm sorry, but I do think he's a little bit weak on stuff like this when it comes to the woke mob. I don't know who was advising him over the Ngozi Fulani issue that took place. That was absolutely catastrophic, that Lady Susan Hussey was thrown under the bus, that there was some massive unreserved apology dished out to this lady, and now here we are again. I mark my words, there's going to end up being some kind of financial recompense or something that he had nothing to do with, and frankly, none of us have either. But earlier today, historian and broadcaster David Starkey spoke to Esther and Phil.
David, is this a good move for King Charles?
I think not for the first time. It's the height of folly. Also, it's 180 years late. What we forget is that the monarchy apologised fully, absolutely and eloquently for slavery in 1840, when Prince Albert, who's whatever Charles's great-great-great-grandfather, said, slavery is the desolation of Africa and the blackest stain on civilized Europe. That's then. And also, what's interesting about it, Esther, is that's when we were doing something about it. Only 3 years before that, Britain had abolished the entire slave trade and slavery throughout the British Empire. The whole weight of the British Navy was being turned against slavery.
Well, there we go. I am joined in the studio now by our political commentator, GB News presenter Emily Carver. And Emily, I know you've got a show coming up later, so we'll talk about what's coming up on that. But yeah, when it comes to this issue, how do you feel about the idea that King Charles might give in and end up paying some kind of reparations for the slave trade, which he, of course, had no part in?
Well, it's such a predictable chain of events, isn't it? You have The Guardian, they find historic links, which, of course, none of us knew would be the case.
Guardian does have historic links.
Well, yes, they do themselves, so I guess this is part of a, look elsewhere type thing. Then King Charles says he supports this research. OK, great. Research into historic links. And then come the calls for reparations. And the problem is, and then a Tory MP comes out and says, well, if we're going to pay reparations, they should come from the king, not from the taxpayer, which I agree with. If King Charles feels so bad about the monarchy's historic links dating back to 1689, that's a particular offence we're talking about here. If he cares so much about it, he should pay for them out of his own pocket, and I think most people would agree with that. It's certainly not for the taxpayer to be paying. None of us alive today have anything to do
But then the difficulty
with slavery.
With this is, how would you then quantify what he owes, if anything? And then also, I'm sorry, but I would like to look at the taxpayers' links to the money that would be paid for his family's historic links to the slave trade. I mean, realistically, the money whatever money King Charles would pay to the people of Grenada or other Commonwealth nations, and it would open the floodgates, wouldn't it? You could very easily trace that back to money received by the taxpayer, and I don't want any part of that.
Well, and there's also the point that we have a very generous foreign aid budget in this country. Usually, I think it is 0.7% of our entire GDP that goes to other countries to help with investment, construction, whatever it is that it's spent on. I think most people in this country, considering, well, the cost of living crisis, considering that we're always told how many children are living in poverty in this country, we have homeless veterans and so on and so forth. I think most people will think, you know what, we are generous as a country. We can sometimes take the moral high ground. Let's look, what are we going to do? The Ottoman Empire, Genghis Khan, the Roman Empire, Vikings, whatever. There have been many empires in this world. Many have been far more brutal than the British Empire ever was, actually, if you look at your history. And, of course, we had a huge part to play in abolishing the slave trade once and for all. I think there should be more focus on modern slavery that is still rife across the world. That should be where the focus lies.
Especially prevalent in Africa, by the way, actually, modern slavery at the moment. And do you think there is a bigger picture here? If we zoom out from all of this, I understand that there will be people who are desperate to benefit financially from anything, and slave trade reparations, they're inclined to ask for it, they're not inclined to get it. But then if you look at The Guardian, for example, now, the coronation is coming up, and it is just, and this is going to happen, mark my words, this kind of stuff is going to happen day in, day out on the front page, attacking the monarchy, attacking the monarchy, attacking the monarchy. What is the bigger picture here?
Well, I imagine most people who write for The Guardian, work at The Guardian and read The Guardian don't approve of the monarchy. They'd rather we had some kind of president and completely scrapped the whole thing. For some people in this country, they simply don't wish for us to have a monarchy. And I think this is clearly, this whole story and the way it's been expressed in the media is all an attempt to undermine the monarchy. And I think King Charles does risk going along with that a bit too much. He clearly wants to get support for the monarchy by doing these types of things, but I think he risks doing the reverse, actually.
But and just one more on this. Is this actually a big problem that he could have going down the line? Because unfortunately, I think there's stuff with the climate change lobby who, are going to hammer him. There will be nothing that he can do on that would actually appease them. There will be nothing that you can do for people who are already anti-monarchy. He could never go far enough. So actually, he's on a hiding to nothing. And I think it was a bit similar with the Ngozi Fulani situation, where she was absolutely slamming Lady Susan Hussey for basically daring to ask her where she was really from. And he apologised unreservedly for that. There were calls then for more apologies. People who already thought that the royal family had a race problem will always think that, and there is nothing that he can do about it.
Yeah, I think the problem is that when you give an inch, people take a mile, of course, and some people in this country will never be happy, whatever he does. I think that's perfectly right. But I think studying links with the slave trade, of course, that's interesting. That's what historians do. That's what people may or may not be interested to find out more about. But then to go down, talking about how apologising for what your forefathers have done, for what previous generations have done. King William III, who took this money from a slave trading company, he didn't even have any children. So King Charles is not a direct descendant of this man, of this monarch. So and the problem is also when you attack the monarchy, a lot of British people feel like it's an attack on them too. Should British people, should every single one of us be apologising for what happened in the 17th century, I think a lot of people would say, actually, no. There are horrors throughout history in practically every single country in this world. Things have happened that we are not proud of.
I think it's symptomatic as well of something that really, really winds me up, which is that there are very real and present issues facing this country today. And instead of dealing with those things head on and tackling those things head on, which, by the way, a lot of the time people are banned from doing or feel banned from doing due to political correctness, so we don't do any of this stuff, so we live in a mess. And we are focusing almost entirely on things that have happened, in this case, in the 17th century. But there we go. Look, you are coming up later on, aren't you? You're covering in for Jubes again. What have you got on the agenda?
Well, we've got lots on the agenda. I'll give you one tease. We will, of course, be talking about Labour's recent tweet, recent campaign about Rishi Sunak. Accusations of dog whistle politics. We'll be breaking that down. We'll also be talking a little bit about Easter. What does it mean to you? What
does it mean to you? And I understand that you and I are going to be doing an Easter egg taste test at the end of this show.
Which I'm very much looking forward to. I've had a light lunch in anticipation.
I have not. OK, all right. Stephanie Carver there will be covering for Jubes & Co. and is a GB News presenter, of course. Right, what do you make of all of that? Get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Patrick, we need to learn to live with our history, says Alan. Slavery is still going on around the world. We stopped slavery. We paid the Americans for this right up until very, very recently. Stop blaming England for everything you don't like. Alan, good stuff. What an email to finish that particular segment on. Now, moving on. So migrants being put on barges. But is Rishi Sunak about to stick prisoners on floating jails as well? He's had a look at this barge that's going to be off the coast of Dorset, and he's like, I need a bit more. I need more barge. I need more barge. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Coming up this week, a very special GB News Easter programme.
we are invited during this short time to enter into the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's an invitation to take part in the most important part of the Christian life and explore the meanings of charity and faith. Happy Easter. Alleluia. The meaning of Easter with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, this week on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, welcome back. Now, transport companies are warning of extensive delays to millions of Brits who are on the move this Easter weekend, which is good news in a way, because don't bother going. Just sit where you are, watch telly, watch me. Last weekend, though, the Port of Dover declared a critical incident because people on coaches had to wait for more than 15 hours to board ferries, and the chaos is likely to peak tomorrow, with around 15 million drivers expected to take to the roads. GB News' national reporter Theo Chicomba is live now from Dover, though, and it doesn't look like there's that much traffic. Theo, what's going on?
Yes, well, at the moment, it's not the peak of the day, but during the peak of the day today, people were queuing for some time. Over 2 hours, some people were here. I spoke to some passengers who'd been in queues, and they were saying it's frustrating, but they anticipated that the traffic was going to be here today. But the Port of Dover have managed to manage the situation this week better than they did last week, particularly when it comes to coaches. They've designated a lane for coaches to come into the Port of Dover, and they are getting processed a lot quicker than they did last week. But throughout the day, it's only within the last half an hour or so where the police have left this area. They were managing lorries and cars coming into the port. They were being staggered, and that, of course, is something the port has been working on this week, so that we didn't see scenes of chaos which were seen last week. But there has been heavy traffic here, particularly as millions of people are heading in and around the UK, and of course many looking to head over to Calais as well.
There we go, Theo. Thank you very much. Theo Chicomba there, who's been in Dover for us. But things are looking a little bit better than expected there, aren't they? Which is good news. But it is a different story, apparently, in other parts of the country. GB News viewers now will be able to see the scenes at St Pancras International Station in London earlier today, with huge queues to board trains. Can I just say that my commute looks like that every morning? But there we go. Euston Station is closed because of engineering works, which has added to the chaos. So there we go. We spoke to one traveller, though, who's had real problems.
It's been eventful. We were trying to get a train to Sheffield, the 12:02 from St Pancras, and we were on the platform. Hundreds of people there were told over the speaker that we weren't to board the train, that the train was already full, and people were standing up on the train. You know, we'd paid for tickets, so we just didn't expect that at all. They didn't give any explanation. They just said there'd be no more trains to the north. The best place that we could get to would be Milton Keynes, so that we'd have to make our own way back to Manchester from there, perhaps with a bus. So yeah, there wasn't really any alternative offered. Bit of a shambles, to be honest. A lot of anxiety, a lot of families there with children. Absolute chaos. In the end, we have managed to get flight tickets, which is an expense that we hadn't really allowed for. But, you know, we just want to get home. Got to get home to our daughter. I've got work to do. So, you know, it's had a knock-on effect. But what can you do?
Oh, it's a shame. He must have had to have sold the buttons off his shirt to get that flight ticket, mustn't he? But there we are. Right, OK, so 2 days after the government confirmed that it's going to house migrants on a barge, they could now put prisoners on jail boats. So Rishi Sunak appears to have looked at the barge situation and thought, I need more of this. It's been reported that Rishi Sunak is considering plans to place convicts in floating jails. It's a possible solution to the overcrowding problem that faces prisons in the UK. To get more reaction to this story, I am joined now by Mark Johnson, who is a former prisoner and the founder of User Voice, who represent former inmates. Look, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. So, floating prisons. Let's just get your take on that initially. Good idea? Bad idea?
Well, it's not a new policy, actually. And how you started this piece of going, yeah, let's get while we're doing that, we might as well do this. And that's how it sounds like this policy's been put together. 1997, there was a ship called the Weir that was actually used in the Falklands War, that was shipped over to America and then brought back from the Americans over here and put into the prison system in 97, and it was used to 2005, and I think it housed about 300 prisoners. So here we go again. Here's a rehash of basically that. what we've got is the most lazy policy making ever, and for them to expect the public to sort of lap this up, their policy is around what they want to increase prison places, like 20,000 new prison places by 2027, right? Instead of addressing the problems of the reconviction figures of the people that are in British prisons at the moment. The conditions in prison now are 22 hours a day bang up. The prisoners are given what they call distraction packs, colouring books, and remedial kind of maths and English bits of paper. The supply industry around education, charities that work in, they're all being paid, but actually not getting any contact or access to prisoners. That's the stuff that we should be talking about.
What would you say, Mark, to some people who might be watching this now who say, good, people have committed horrific crimes and they should be locked in their cell for 22 hours a day and they should be board rigid?
For me, I'm not emotive on the subject whatsoever. The fact is, the data, it doesn't work. Increasing prison places does not work. Let's go to America, where 1 in 83 people are locked up, right? They're locked up for longer, yet their reconviction figures are higher, right? What we're not doing here is looking at the history behind Tory policy. And you go from, can you remember the Hugger Hoodie campaign? Yes. Then the Transforming Rehabilitation, where they privatised. Then they brought it back into unification. Now you've got even the probation service on its knees, where you've got 100% caseload. You've got recruitment strategies and shopping precincts in your local area for prison staff. They do not have the staff to man the prisons. That's what, and ultimately the public are paying. An average cost goes from £30,000 to £80,000 a year per prisoner. It doesn't work. We need to really talk about this and just not be like, not sort of listen to this really lazy polarised vote-winning story.
I get what you mean. Look, I absolutely get what you mean, because it will give the impression, it's a little bit really like what's going on with the Channel stuff, which is we had 487 people arrive across the Channel yesterday, and everyone was celebrating, or a lot of people were celebrating, this idea that we've got a barge off the coast of Dorset that is going to house around 500 people. So that basically is the amount of people that you would have in one day. So it's not a solution, really, is it? It's not a solution at all. And when I look at the amount of people now that are in prison, and we do have to balance the fact that we've got a growing population, so there's more people, which will mean that potentially there will be more crimes, and there is the potential for more people to end up in prison. And we are not really building that many more prisons. So on paper, this might look like a decent idea. Let's put a barge somewhere in the Thames and build a prison on it and shove a load of people there. But you're saying that won't work because the root cause of this is that people keep committing crimes, so they just keep ending back up in prison anyway.
This is a mass, like, this is getting to the point of, like, a political deception to the public. Do you know what I mean? Like, the fact is, like, they've disinvested into any rehabilitation programmes. I mean, about 2/3 of drug rehabs have closed under the last, 12 years. If you're looking at 22 hours a day banger, you imagine, like, some people that commit heinous crimes, like, really serious crimes and stuff, right? And what do the public want to know? Yes, they're being punished, but they also want to know that they're faced with their crime every day and get an opportunity that when they come out, they never do the same thing again. And yet we've got this insanity at the moment where we accept the reconviction figures. They're 60 to 80% reconviction figures from 2 to 10 years. It doesn't work. And we really need to start to, not accept this, like, literally this very low level sort of pandering to tough on crime propaganda that they seem to want to keep reinventing. It's actually Labour policy. The ship was Labour policy. The latest policy.
You know what's remarkable as well? You know what's remarkable as well is that it was Tony Blair who first looked into sending people to Rwanda a very long time ago. They've all gone very quiet about that. So there just seems to be a bit of a rehashing job there. Look, mate, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Good to chat to you. Mark Johnson there is a former prisoner and the founder of User Voice, who represents former inmates. Look, it's one of these policies, isn't it, that I think can look good on paper, which is, look, we're going to build another prison. It's going to be on a barge somewhere. It's going to be on a prison ship. And people think, OK, great, all right. Now, look, I am actually all for longer sentences for some crimes. I am for people being locked away for a very long period of time. I absolutely am. But then at the same time, is this actually going to be value for money? When's it even going to happen? And is it going to be worthwhile if it's not going to cut down on rehabilitation and reconviction rates? Now, look, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just getting this through in my ear right now. So apparently I've got some very sad news to bring you, and indeed I do. Paul Catamol, who was the singer with the pop group S Club 7, has sadly died at the age of 46. S Club had 4 number-1 hit singles and recently announced they were going to do a comeback tour later this year. I'll read that for you one more time. So that is Paul Catamol, who was a singer with the pop group S Club 7, has sadly died at the age of 46. S Club had 4 number-1 hit singles and did recently announce that they were going to do a comeback tour later this year. So that's the breaking news. I'll have a bit more info on that as and when we get it. But look, moving on. So, Labour Party is under fire after posting a tweet about paedophiles that's been called appalling, nauseating and shameful. But guess what? They've got on the attack again. Labour have doubled down. It is really starting to look like they're coming straight out of the Donald Trump playbook here. And there are growing calls for the royal family to pay reparations for their alleged links to the slave trade that date back to the 17th century. I'm just going to tease ahead to one more one as well for you, which is that how do you feel about the people that we have treating you in the NHS? Apparently we are now importing more foreign doctors than training our own. Does that bother you or not? If so, why? If not, why not? GB Views at gbnews.uk. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a very good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here on GB News. It's just about to go 4 p.m. Here's what I've got coming your way this hour. Labour have been absolutely slammed for what's been called a shameful tweet, which appeared to say that Rishi Sunak didn't care about paedophiles going to prison. Is this gutter politics? In other news, though, yes, are there too many foreign doctors? This is some allegations that have come out that apparently we're now importing more foreign doctors than we are training our own. How do you feel about that? Let me know. And yes, royal news as well. Predictably, after King Charles said that he would welcome an inquisition into the royal family's links to slavery, well, here we go now. Straight away, calls for him to pay reparations. If he's going to pay them, he can pay them himself. I don't think the taxpayer should be anywhere near that. And something a little bit lighter to elevate you. It is Good Friday after all. I was adamant about doing this. OK, I said I wouldn't turn up for work unless they made this happen. I will be taste testing at least 20 Easter eggs later, live on air. Probably better for me than you, that one, but we're doing it anyway. Yes, get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Loads to talk about there. We've got whether or not you think that the King should pay slavery reparations. How do you feel about foreign doctors? Do you think we should train more of our own? Can we train more of our own? And yes, as well, of course, that one at the top. Do you think Labour has dragged politics into the gutter? Or would it already there? gbviews at gbnews.uk. Right now, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 4. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom. The company which audits the accounts of the Scottish National Party has resigned. The accountancy firm Johnston Carmichael have made their decision after reviewing its client portfolio. It follows Nicola Sturgeon's husband, the former SNP chief executive, Peter Murrell, being arrested and then released without charge. Police are investigating his involvement in SNP finances. Police in Northern Ireland are warning their officers could be targeted by dissidents in Londonderry this Easter. That's ahead of a state visit by US President Joe Biden, who's arriving in Belfast on Tuesday. The PSNI says it's received strong intelligence. Attacks are being planned for Bank Holiday Monday. MI5 raised the terrorism threat level in the country to severe following the shooting of a senior detective, John Caldwell. Political commentator Nigel Nelson told us Northern Ireland has seen relative peace over a quarter of a century, showing what an achievement the agreement was.
When it comes to Republican supporters, there are probably about as many in Northern Ireland now as there were during the Troubles. The new IRA doesn't have the capability of, say, launching mainland attacks. But they're obviously, as we can see by the various attacks they've carried out in Northern Ireland, they're hugely dangerous. So, yes, it is a tricky time, but it's a lot better than it was 25 years ago.
The Labour Party has stood by an advert claiming that Rishi Sunak doesn't think child sex abusers should go to prison. The ad, posted on Twitter, has drawn criticism from MPs, with senior Tory ministers accusing the party of a vile and desperate campaign strategy. Labour posted the video pitching itself as the party of law and order, but Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell told GB News the PM should take responsibility.
The digital graphic that's based on, it's like a skit if you like, or a take on the types of graphics that the Prime Minister himself produces about his own policies, and he's become famous for producing these kind of graphics. And so it's a take on that. If it's personal in the sense that he's the guy who runs the country. He is the Prime Minister, and the book does stop with him.
A 16-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a 14-year-old girl died in a fire at a block of flats in East London yesterday. The girl, named locally as Tiffany, died at the scene, and 5 others were injured but have since been discharged from hospital. Emergency services were called to the blaze in Newham at around 5:30 p.m. It's being investigated as suspected arson. A 12-year-old boy has been charged with the murder of a woman who died after being hit by a car in Sheffield. 60-year-old Marcia Grant was hit by a car in Greenhill on Wednesday evening. South Yorkshire Police says the boy, who cannot be named for legal reasons, will appear before Sheffield Youth Court tomorrow. 2 million British holidaymakers are expected to head overseas this Easter weekend. Meanwhile, the Port of Dover is warning those travelling could face 2-hour delays. Ferry operator DFDS urged travellers to allow 120 minutes to complete border controls and check-in. Delays have been blamed on French officials carrying out extra checks, as well as stamping UK passports following Brexit. 2 Israeli women have been shot in an attack on their car in the occupied West Bank, following a day of violence along the Lebanese and Gaza borders. An Israeli army video shows explosions on Hamas weapon production sites and tunnels in retaliation for rocket attacks it blamed on the Islamist group. It comes amid mounting confrontation in Jerusalem during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, as well as the Jewish Passover holiday. The UK has appealed for de-escalation, with the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly saying both sides should negotiate. And S Club 7's Paul Catamol has passed away, aged 46, only weeks after the band announced a comeback tour. In a statement issued by the family and the group, it said there were no words to describe the deep sadness and loss that they feel. He was found yesterday at his home in Dorset. Police have confirmed there were no suspicious circumstances surrounding his death. The band had hits in the 2000s, including Bring It All Back and Reach. You're up to date on GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Patrick.
Welcome along. Now, we start with the huge row caused by a controversial tweet by Labour, which says that Rishi Sunak doesn't think paedophiles should be jailed. By the way, since I've been on air, they've more than doubled down on this. I'll tell you why in a second. It's been branded appalling, nauseating and shameful by MPs from other parties, but a shadow cabinet minister has refused to criticise the tweet. That's right. Lucy Powell, of course, was on earlier on. Do you think that adults convicted of sexually assaulting children should go to prison? Rishi Sunak doesn't, is what the tweet says, which is a lie, isn't it, really? I mean, it's just not true. The tweet says that under Tory rule, 4,500 adults convicted of child sexual assault have avoided jail. And this morning, GB News presenter Stephen Dixon called out Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell for the claims her party was making.
Well, look, it's a graphic, a digital campaigning graphic. I didn't design it. I didn't, put it up there. But it's a digital graphic that's based on. It's like a skit, if you like, or a take on the types of graphics that the Prime Minister himself produces about his own policies, and he's become famous for producing these graphics.
No.
So
Lucy Powell,
it's a take on that.
This isn't a skit. Look, even Twitter itself has had to put a fact check on this, saying the tweet implies that the Prime Minister does not support prison sentences for sexual assaults against children. The current sentencing guidelines has a maximum sentence of 14 years imprisonment. You're implying Rishi Sunak does not think adults convicted of sexually assaulting children should go to prison. Now, that is just not accurate, is it?
But under his watch as Prime Minister, under his government over the last 13 years, we have seen thousands of people who have been convicted of serious child offences, sexual offences and child pornographic material offences, not receiving custodial sentences. And that is what is happening under his watch as Prime Minister. So if it's personal in the sense that he's the guy who runs the country. He is the Prime Minister, and the book does stop with him.
Well, Lucy Powell obviously wasn't backing down there, and Labour sent out another tweet attacking Rishi Sunak just over an hour ago. It's a picture of Sunak smiling next to the message, "Do you think an adult convicted of possessing a gun with intent to harm should go to prison?" Rishi Sunak doesn't. So there's just more of it, isn't there? Clearly, they've got a series of these lined up because they're just going to drop one every day, aren't they, now, for the foreseeable. For more on this, I'm joined by GB News' political reporter, Catherine Forster. Catherine, yeah, look, it's a controversial tactic. Some people are saying, well, it's working because it has got us all talking about Rishi Sunak's record, but it's not really his record, is it? It's the Tory party's.
It's not his record. And of course, he's only been Prime Minister not 6 months. He only came into Parliament 2015. In 2010, and these figures date from 2010 onwards, he was working in investment banking. So not much of this can be laying at his door personally. Sure, you can have a go at the Conservative record on law and order over 13 years, but they've made it very personal to him, haven't they? And saying what he thinks, which I think most people will find... I mean, who honestly believes that Rishi Sunak believes that for a minute that paedophiles shouldn't be in jail? It's ludicrous. But everybody is talking about it, and they, as you say, have completely doubled down.
Yeah, I'm going to get a bit more of a kind of emotive reaction to this with an abuse survivor, actually, in a little bit, which I think will hopefully maybe contextualise exactly how ridiculous some of this stuff is. But Keir Starmer has been accused of leaving a bit of an open goal here. People going on about, well, Labour weren't too hot on Rotherham, the child grooming scandal there. Keir Starmer has been head of the CPS and public prosecutions, and, you know, he was head at the time while some of this stuff was taking place, that he's now criticising Rishi Sunak, who was, as you've said, not even in politics at the time, of being too soft on.
Yeah, you could certainly say it's rich coming from Keir Starmer, couldn't you, having worked in a very senior position in the justice system. But apparently they have been taking lessons from Australian Labour and from the Democrats in America, and they have been advised that if they want to win, they should, the quote I've got is, fight as viciously as the Conservatives. So, you know, Michelle Obama talked about when they go low, we go high. It seems like, well, if they think the Tories have gone low, they're going to go low or maybe even lower. I mean, it is astonishing, really, for somebody who has talked about decency and standards in politics as much as Keir Starmer has. These adverts are going out, and people like Jess Phillips have been retweeting them. Shaban Mahmood, who's the National Campaign Coordinator for Labour, has tweeted it out and has said, Labour is the party of law and order. Now, of course, they've not been in power for 13 years, so all they can do is go, look how bad the Conservatives, what a mess they've made. We would be tougher.
We wouldn't have done this. We wouldn't have done it. Yeah, there you go. Look, Catherine, thank you very, very much. Catherine Forster, political reporter, filling you in. I mean, presumably, the way it's going, there'll be another tweet from Labour in about 20 minutes. Joining me now, though, is broadcaster and journalist, well, I mean, institution of the British media, really. It's Michael Crick. Michael, thank you very much. Now, without wanting to make you feel too old, you've obviously been around the political game for a very long period of time. How low does this rank in terms of things that have gone into the gutter from parties? Well, where do you rate this?
Oh, this is lower than the gutter. This is the sewer. I don't recall anything as bad as this in British politics. I mean, there's been some pretty dishonest stuff put out by the Conservatives as well. I mean, notably in the last mayoral election in London, where they put out a letter that looked like it had come from Sadiq Khan, warning everybody they were going to get huge council tax rises, and it was a Conservative leaflet. But it's just so dishonest. And to put Sunak's signature on it, to tell a lie like that. And the trouble is, once one side does it, then the other side feel justified in, fighting even more dirtily. And it just coarsens the whole nature of our discourse. And, Keir Starmer has a reputation of being a man of decency and integrity. He's a former director of public prosecutions. He should know that whether sex offenders go to jail is determined not by members of parliament, not by the government primarily. It's primarily determined by judges in trials, at the end of trials. He knows that. He's been a prosecutor himself. Now, did Starmer approve this ad? Did he approve the one that's you've just been talking about, the new one? Or was it somebody acting on his behalf? Or did Starmer act like some kind of mafia boss and say, well, lads, go out and do what you need to do, and don't tell me too much about it? I suspect it was the latter, actually. Labour are looking desperate. I mean, they're 20 points ahead in the polls. They shouldn't need to worry like this. They shouldn't need to have to panic like this and resort to this kind of dishonesty. Really, it is dishonesty. What kind of lesson does that send to the nation's school children? And frankly, of all the issues on which Labour should attack the Conservatives in such a dishonest manner, sex abuse, sex scandals, sexual assaults are just about the last. Because as you referred earlier, there wasn't just Rotherham where the council turned a blind eye and failed to do anything about appalling sex trafficking going on and affecting hundreds and hundreds of girls, but also in Oldham as well. I mean, if they're not careful, Labour are going to prompt people to start looking into those stories and the way in which Labour politicians turned a blind eye to what was going on and had unhealthy relationships with some of the people with it who were behind what was going on, and indeed attacked whistleblowers, and in one case even tried to get several whistleblowers sacked from their jobs. Labour's record on this is appalling. This is one of the last issues on which they should be going for the Conservatives.
I think it screams of, actually, very, very bad politics and potentially very, very bad management. As you've rightly said there, Michael, this opens a door. I'm not saying it's a door that everyone, from a moral perspective, should be hurtling headfirst through, but look, people will. And, you know, I mean, it is a bit of a gift. I now, for example, can sit here and talk about Keir Starmer's record as head of public prosecutions, about Rotherham, about all of the grooming gang issues that you've just raised there. I wouldn't have been talking about that today if it wasn't for this. So now that's out there on the news. I mean, do you think that this just screams... Go on. Now you can take it away, back. Go on.
I was going to say, next time you interview Jim McMahon, say, the Shadow Environment Secretary, perhaps you'd like to delve into his record at Oldham Council when he was leader there, and whether he did enough to stop the appalling sex trafficking that went on under the council's nose at that time. Now, I don't know whether McMahon knew what was going on or the extent to it, but what was his role in trying to stop it? That's something that's well worth exploring. Labour's got to be very careful here that some of this stuff it could come dangerously close to home.
Yeah, look, 100%. Michael, look, thank you very, very much. Absolute pleasure, that. Take care. Hopefully see you soon. Michael Crick there, broadcaster, journalist, industry, institutionalism. See, there we go. Yeah, I mean, I think he's absolutely expertly summarised the myriad of problems here that Keir Starmer has opened for himself. Joining me now, though, and I'm fascinated to get the take of this individual, really, is a child sex abuse survivor and campaigner, is Dave Sharp. Dave, thank you very much for coming on, and thank you for your bravery and everything that you do, talking out about the devastating impact that child sexual abuse has. How do you feel about the idea that, it would appear to me anyway, that child sexual abuse is essentially being weaponised as a political tool now?
Well, this is exactly what's happening. What we have to understand here, Patrick, is first thing we have to understand is what exactly are the Labour Party saying here? Are they saying that they will lock up paedophiles better than the Conservatives? Are they saying themselves that they haven't done anything in the past? Are they going to change things different? If that's the case, show us what you're going to do.
Dave, let me just very quickly, Dave, sorry about this. Slight problem with your microphone. I'm going to just ask you another question in a second now. We're going to get that microphone issue sorted out, I think. Just give me 1 second and we'll come back to you, Dave. Okay. All right. So look, just to kind of contextualise about why we're talking to Dave, hopefully go back to him in a second, it's because Labour have put out this big campaign advert which basically says that Rishi Sunak doesn't care about paedophiles being sent to prison, which, I mean, is a lie, just a complete lie. They've doubled down on it. They've retweeted it since. The Labour press office has done that. They've since put another tweet up saying that he doesn't care about people going to prison if they have a gun and intend to use that. So basically shoot people to death. I mean, Rishi Sunak obviously does care about that stuff. And it's all part of a big campaign of Labour trying to say they are the party of law and order. But I think it might actually snap back on Labour because people can go, well, Keir, weren't you head of the CPS? Didn't you have the opportunity to prosecute more people? Could or should you have not prosecuted more people, including some very prominent people? And look at Rotherham, look at the child grooming gang areas, etc. Did they do enough about that? Dave Sharp is back now, I believe. Thank you very much. Cheers, Dave. Sorry about that, my good man. Look, you were saying that you're concerned, I think, about them weaponising the child sexual abuse for political gain. Is that right?
Yeah. One of the biggest things in our country, and what we were saying earlier on about using the Australian model, for example. What people have to understand is that as a nation, be it Britain, Scotland and Ireland or England, we have a problem dealing with this subject. When I say we, I'm talking about the general public. That is the biggest weapon that the government have, is that there's not enough people speaking out. Now, what this guy's done today, Keir Starmer, is basically, as you've said yourself, Patrick, he shot himself in the foot. Because if you look at Twitter, 80% of people who responded on Twitter were Labour members who talk about, one person said that this is cheap in politics. Now, hang on a minute. How do you think the survivors feel with that kind of language? You know, 80% that responded on Twitter all say, we don't talk about this kind of thing. And a couple of people even used the word gutter. This is an insult to survivors who have had to live with this all their life. I mean, what kind of focus groups are dealing with this and giving this kind of guidance to the Labour Party, opening up this can of worms and not expecting a response from survivors? Now, I said on Twitter today that there is now, Patrick, more survivors of historical child sex abuse in prison than there is paedophiles. That shows that the justice system is broken, completely broken.
Yeah, it does. And clearly it's survivors who are let down in the moment, so at the time when this horrible abuse is taking place, and then in their lives that follow, that would indicate, wouldn't it, as well? And we're seeing this time and time again. Look, the grooming gang issue is something that we have been very, very focused on here at GB News. We've done a lot of work on and doing our best to try to expose it and try to get certain things done about it. And I know that recently the Conservative government said that they were really going to try to look into it even more. But do you just feel as a nation that we shy away from tackling the very real issue of rampant paedophilia and rampant child sexual abuse in this country, and that, frankly, neither political party should be trying to claim that they've actually got a grip of this thing and they're the ones that really care about the kids?
But not the only ones that care, they're the only ones that can actually do something about it. Because what we have in this country is, and I want to be careful not to tear away from any people doing the good work, when we talk about the grooming gangs, we look at the care system. The number of people who are coming out the care system, we've now got more under 25s in prison. We've got more kids on drugs. People are coming out the care system, and the speed, Patrick, the speed at which some of these kids are getting through the social services, the justice system with lawyers and judges. Why? Because they don't like to talk about it. As soon as you mention child sex abuse, it's a fact. We are treated worse than criminals because nobody wants to take and listen to the real hard stories of what we suffered. And it makes it so easy for the grooming gangs. It makes it so easy for survivors to be exploited by various different groups.
Yeah, indeed. Look, I really appreciate you coming on, Dave. Thank you very, very much. And hopefully we chat again soon. Dave Sharp there, who is a child sex abuse survivor and a campaigner, taking an incredibly dim view of Keir Starmer's, or the Labour Party's, decision to go and tweet out that Rishi Sunak doesn't care whether or not paedophiles go to prison. I mean, when you look at Rotherham, we spoke to Michael Crick as well before that, didn't we? Just saying this is going to absolutely open the floodgates for people now to go, all right, what's Labour's record on this? Because, spoiler alert, it's not good. Now, though, to a concerning report from Migration Watch on the NHS. They've revealed that more foreign doctors joined the health service last year than the number of medical students who enrolled in courses. Let's go through some of the key findings now, shall we? So more than 12,000 doctors joined NHS England from abroad last year. That's well above the amount of overseas doctors joining NHS England. They outnumbered British students who signed up to medicine courses. A massive 46% of doctors who joined the NHS in 2022 were foreign nationals. And less than half of the people in the UK who applied for places on medicine courses were successful. Look, joining me now is Dr. Bharat Pankania, who's a senior clinical lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School. Dr. Bharat, great stuff. It's nice to actually not be talking to you about COVID for once, actually. It's good. So, should people be worried about this? Or actually, is this a good thing? Why should people, if they are, be concerned about the idea that we've got more foreign doctors joining our NHS than we are creating our own, as it were?
Christy, the big issue is we are not training enough doctors in the United Kingdom. Furthermore, it is not possible for us to train a large increased number at the drop of a hat. There's a lot of planning, preparation, facilities, tutors like myself to be found, engaged, and to train. Furthermore, we have also got one more problem, which is by the time we have expensively trained all these doctors in the United Kingdom, many of them are either giving up on medicine altogether, or many of them are emigrating to other countries like Canada, Australia, New Zealand. So we have a problem on multiple fronts. My view is and I'm on record. I sit on BMA committees, and I remember sitting in one room and I said, it is not right to be poaching doctors from poorer nations because we have failed to produce our own. But we need to produce our own. We need to make the facilities good for our own to stay here. And this is a big task we must undertake. Nevertheless,
Can I just ask,
we have to do it.
The question I would say is, does it actually really matter if we are employing doctors from other countries who we have not had to go through the expense as a nation of paying to train, and they are good enough, then why should it bother people?
Well, it's not a question of it, why should it bother people, but looking at it globally, it is very important that we do not deprive other countries of their own homegrown doctors. So what we are doing really is deferring investment in our own doctors and asking other countries which can
should Canada and Australia not be doing? But isn't it wrong then for Canada and Australia to be trying to pinch our doctors?
Well, this is what happens when you have what you call where can I get cheap labor from, and where are the facilities better? So yes, Canada ought to train more of its own doctors. Same with Australia. Same with New Zealand. Unfortunately, we all know that it costs a lot of money to train. Therefore, what happens is UK doctors go to Canada, Australia, New Zealand. India, Africa doctors come to the UK. And that is your free market at play. What was better, Christy, was this. We had freedom of movement between the European Union countries and the UK. And there we were benefiting from doctors from the European Union. And remember, one day, we would also like to go and work in the European Union and the other way around. Unfortunately, that is a lot more difficult now further to Brexit. And therefore, we end up not only having doctors from
Would you support, Dr. Bragg, can I ask just quickly, would you support a ban on British doctors being able to go to Canada and Australia? Because that would remove the top ceiling then, wouldn't it? And then they'd have to stay here, and then the people from India or wherever else that they're coming from would then, or Africa, as you were saying, would presumably have to stay where they are. It would all sort the whole thing out, wouldn't it, if Australia and Canada were banned from pinching our doctors?
No, we can't do that in a free movement. But what we can do, and it's a lot easier than banning, it's simple. Make the conditions better, make the conditions less hostile, and therefore people won't leave. That is what we need to do.
Good stuff. Thank you very much, Dr. Parag Pankani there, who's a senior clinical lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School. Right, OK, so should the royal family pay reparations for the alleged links to the slave trade dating back more than 300 years? I called it yesterday. There was the first wave. King Charles says he's going to cooperate with an inquisition into the slave trade. OK, fine. Well, what comes next, Charles? They're going to call for you to pay reparations. You go, well, I wouldn't refuse to pay reparations. Right, so you're going to end up paying stuff, which means we're all going to end up paying stuff. Do you mind not doing that, please? Because I've got nothing to do with the slave trade. Anyway, there we go. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my common sense crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I've got loads more coming your way between now and 5 p.m. On Good Friday, I'm going to ask the question, is the UK still a Christian country? In France, people have been putting crucifixes up just to remind people that they are still a Christian country. So there you go. I think that's a discussion worth having today, isn't it? And after agreeing to put migrants on a barge, could Rishi Sunak soon decide to house prisoners on floating jails as well? Bit of a juxtaposition between those two stories, isn't there? But there we are. But right now, though, before we get stuck into all of that and a big discussion about whether or not you, the taxpayer, will be comfortable paying reparations for the slave trade if King Charles decides that, well, frankly, we all should, that's going to be a discussion and a half. But right now is your headlines with Bethany.
Patrick, thank you. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom at 4:31. The company which audits the accounts of the Scottish National Party has resigned. The accountancy firm Johnston Carmichael have made the decision after reviewing its client portfolio. It follows Nicola Sturgeon's husband, the former SNP chief executive, Peter Murrell, being arrested and then released without charge. Police are continuing to investigate his role in SNP finances. Police in Northern Ireland are warning their officers could be targeted by dissidents in Londonderry this Easter. That's ahead of a state visit by US President Joe Biden, who's arriving in Belfast on Tuesday. The PSNI says it's received strong intelligence. Attacks are being planned for Bank Holiday Monday. MI5 raised the terrorism threat level in the country to severe, following the shooting of senior detective John Caldwell. The Labour Party has stood by an advert claiming that Rishi Sunak doesn't think child sex abusers should go to prison. The ad posted on Twitter has drawn criticism from MPs, with senior Tory ministers accusing Labour of a vile and desperate campaign strategy. And S Club 7's Paul Cattermole has passed away, aged 46, only weeks after the band announced a comeback tour. In a statement issued by the family and group, it said, "There are no words to describe their deep sadness." He was found yesterday at his home in Dorset. Police say his death is not being treated as suspicious. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. Now it's back to Patrick.
Well, yesterday I covered the news that the royal family had agreed to cooperate with research into the historical links between the British monarchy and the transatlantic slave trade. I said at the time that people would jump on this bandwagon, and sure enough, now they have. It took less than 24 hours, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. The National Reparations Commission of Grenada wants the royals now to hold talks with them about paying reparations. It will not end here. It will keep on going. And King Charles, I've just got a horrible feeling, is going to cave into this stuff. And then it becomes a question of, well, who's paying for it? Because is it the taxpayer? Well, it's not going to be me. I'm joined now by Dr. Philip Kizali, who's a cultural historian and a lecturer at the University of Leeds. Thank you very much. How do you feel about the idea that King Charles has not ruled out paying reparations?
First of all, hi Patrick. It's nice to speak to you again. I'm flabbergasted, really, disappointed, upset, and I fear what's going to happen. I mean, let's just get this right. First of all, this is, I think, as far as I can see, a very inexperienced researcher. This is a PhD project, so this is a student. The king is putting the reputation of the monarchy in the hands of a student. Okay, so that's one thing which is incredibly alarming. And if this stuff is based in critical race theory, which I think it is, there's no discussion. It's not really about understanding history. It's not about getting to grips with the past and getting a deeper dialogue. It's about obliterating British culture, and it's about obliterating British monarchy. It's, as Douglas Murray has said before, it's a war on the West, it's a war on our values. And I think for the king to even consider being involved in such a project is, as I say, quite frankly, alarming.
Look, mark my words, it'll go from this. It went from, well, would you cooperate with an investigation? And he goes, yeah, all right then. And then it goes, right, OK, less than 24 hours on. Well, will you pay reparations? And he goes, well, I won't rule it out. And then it'll end up being someone will slap a figure on it and there'll be some kind of token figure. And then that figure won't be enough. But if we look back at where this all started recently from The Guardian, it was a document, I think I'm right in saying, from 1684 with King William III. 1689, there you go, just been speedily corrected, from King William III, and it equated to, in today's money, apparently, around £133,000 worth of shares, OK? So if King Charles now says, all right, well, I will split it evenly around the Commonwealth, £133,000, they'll end up adding that up to the millions, and it's just going to keep getting higher and higher and higher, isn't it? And then who pays for it?
Well, I don't really think it's a question of who pays for it, because I don't think anybody can pay for it, because, as you say, there isn't a ceiling here. It will just go on forever and ever. But it's the motivation behind the whole thing. And I think, just to dig a little bit deeper into what I said before, if the lobby groups here and the researchers and everybody involved really cared about slavery, they wouldn't be obsessing about something that happened 200 or 300 years ago to one particular group of people, because slavery was global. Slavery isn't racial, it's tribal. Okay, so slavery happened everywhere. And in Africa, people of colour enslave people of colour. And that's still happening. My point is this: if these people cared about slavery, they would be involved with tackling modern-day slavery. Okay, they'd be involved with...
So is the implication there, Dr. Philip?
Just very quickly, Patrick, slavery in Africa, and dealing with people like the Uyghur Muslims in China, for example. 1.2 million Uyghur Muslims are in concentration camps there. 500,000 of them are picking cotton in fields.
Well, there you go, the optics of that alone. Just very quickly, very finally, Dr. Philip, then, do you think this is just a shameless attempt to try to get money, and it's not actually about slavery?
It's not about slavery, as I've just said. I think it is. It's brute politics. It's trying to destroy Britain. It's trying to destroy British heritage. It's trying to destroy tradition, and it's the old identitarian thing. If it wasn't about race, it would be about gender or sexuality.
Yeah, Dr. Philip, look, thank you very much. Look, great to chat to you again, and hopefully we talk again very, very soon. Dr. Philip Kizali there, a cultural historian and a lecturer at the University of Leeds. And actually, how refreshing is it to hear someone from a university come out and talk like that? Because normally they've all got multicoloured hair and they're waxing lyrical about culture, identity and all this nonsense. Anyway, Good Friday is regarded by some people as the holiest day of the Christian year. So it seemed appropriate to ask, is the UK still a Christian country? Last year's census showed that less than half of people in England and Wales said they were Christian. And viewers on GB News can see an image now from the Loire Valley in France, where there is a large crucifix with a model of Jesus. It's part of an event staged by an organisation that has said in the past that they want to remind the people of France that it is still a Christian land. And I think this is fascinating, because I've been seeing increasingly now a lot of stuff going on around Eid and all of this stuff. Fine, OK, but less and less stuff about the fact that it's Easter. I think, and I just wonder what that all really means. Joining me now is Dr. Gavin Ashenden, a former chaplain to Queen Elizabeth II. Gavin, thank you very, very much. Are we still a Christian country?
No, I don't think we are. We have been, and it did some wonderful things for our culture, for our understanding of the sanctity of human beings, for our understanding about the way to live moral lives. But in a strange way, our culture has been throwing it off. And there are two other ideas around, two other philosophies. One is Islam, which is about submission, and the other is, of course, Marxism and wokery. And it's really surprising to me that people are turning their back on Christ, because Christianity is the most beautiful religion. It looks at this ingenious and wonderful world and sees an intelligence behind it is kind and compassion, and wants to forgive us and remake us, and cares so much for us that God became a human being. You can't find a more inspiring or wonderful idea. And the idea that people are turning their backs on it, I think really because of social pressure, is a surprise, and it's really sad. So people like me are trying very hard to keep it in the public space.
There was an interesting example recently, I think, that came from Scotland. And you had Kate Forbes, who has what some people would regard as being a relatively traditional Christian view, certainly when it comes to things like same-sex marriage, etc. And then you've got Humza Yousaf, who identifies as a Muslim. And when Humza Yousaf won and became Scotland's First Minister, he went to Bute House, and there was, the pictures were put out of this, some kind of Islamic ceremony, a call to prayer, whatever it was. And I wondered whether or not you think that Kate Forbes would have got a lot of pushback had she immediately, moving into Bute House, had a Christian ceremony in there, in a way that Humza Yousaf as a Muslim did not.
Well, there's no doubt at all she'd have had the world landing on her shoulders. The left and the left media don't like Christianity. You'd have to ask them why they don't like it. But they're giving Islam a pass. And it's a very odd thing, because Islam is much more rigorous on homosexuals. I mean, they throw them from buildings in some Islamic countries. Islam is much more rigorous against women and women's rights. They dress them up and they hide them away. It's extremely hard to understand why the liberal left give Islam a pass and seem to really dislike Christianity. Frankly, it's irrational. And it's so irrational, that's the point where people like me, who try and develop sensitive radars about good and evil, wonder whether or not what we're dealing with is a kind of spiritual evil that inspires people to turn against the very thing that could help them most.
It's fascinating stuff. Look, thank you very, very much. I always appreciate our chats. And Good Friday to you, my good man. Dr. Gavin Ashenden there, who's the former chaplain to Queen Elizabeth II. There we go. Right, OK, look, prisoners could be kept on boats in floating jails. There's a juxtaposition between these stories, isn't there? Under new government plans, Rishi Sunak had a look at the barge off the coast of Dorset, as and when it gets there, and he thinks, I need more barge. Tell you what we can do with this. We can put prisoners on it. But will it actually work? What do you think about all of this? I'm Patrick Christys, right here on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Prisoners could be kept on boats in floating jails under new plans being considered by the Prime Minister. According to government sources, this could be a part of Rishi Sunak's plans to tackle overcrowding in prisons across the country. It comes 2 days after the Home Office announced that migrants will be housed on barges instead of hotels to cut costs. Joining me now to discuss this further is international security and border control expert Henry Bolton. Henry, thank you very, very much. Would you put prisoners on barges?
Hi, Patrick. Yeah, why not? I mean, you wouldn't put them on a coal barge, I guess, really, but, there are barges being used in various parts of the world as prisons. They're reasonably secure. They have all the accommodation needs that a prisoner needs, the welfare needs, the medical needs, the administrative facility. Why not? There's not a lot of difference to putting them on land, to be honest, except that it's floating. I don't see why not at all.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it could actually be, in a way, better, because at the moment we'd have to build more prisons for the amount of people that we're sending to prison, which, where do you put all of those? I suppose what we could just do is put them on floating barges, could we not? Or put them out to sea. And in a way as well, would that even be more of a deterrent? At the moment, I'm not convinced that going to prison is acting as that much of a deterrent to people. It might if they were in the middle of the ocean.
No, I agree with you, Patrick. There's something about, a ship or a vessel that's at sea or moored off a port somewhere or even alongside that suggests it's isolating you, and prison should isolate prisoners. That's its purpose, is to take them out of society where they can't do harm to society and where they can ideally reflect on what they've done and try and turn their life around. And you can't do that if you are keeping them within society. I mean, there's a school of thought, isn't there, that says, well, we should be sort of allowing prisoners to go out, the open prisons and so on. And actually, there are not really that many restrictions on them beyond, for example, police bail. So, that there's not really a deterrent factor there. If you've got people that really need to be sort of isolated, really given the sort of messaging, the visual messaging, the environmental messaging that they are being punished, then I think it's appropriate.
It will be fascinating,
why
Henry.
not?
It will be fascinating
people who are being
to see the difference in the public reaction when a barge goes up with pretty much exactly the same accommodation, maybe even worse accommodation, actually, worse accommodation than the barge that we're going to see off the coast of Dorset. And people, the vast majority of the people there will not have any problems whatsoever about putting criminals, even minor criminals, on a barge and jetting them off to the ocean. But people who have arrived in this country illegally over the channel, who we don't know who they are or where they're from or whatever, people will be up in arms about putting them on a barge somewhere in Dorset where they can come and go as they please. It is a fascinating lesson, I think, in whose human rights a lot of people care more about.
In your previous sort of item, you sort of touched a bit on how one religion is treated differently to another, with more tolerance, more acceptance, and so on. we've got much the same here, I think. And there are many areas of society in which the public and activists particularly, and many politicians take a particular sort of approach to one thing and then take the opposite approach on something else.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons that our country is in a mess. And it's one of the reasons, Patrick, why the government has failed to invest in prison infrastructure to the extent that it should have done in the last few decades, which leads to a situation where this has to be considered anyway. But look, let's look at an example where this actually is done. Off New York, Staten Island, there is a large prison barge there. I've actually advocated that that's the model for what we should be putting migrants who cross the channel into as a sort of initial screening centre to screen their immigration status and welfare before allowing them to transit UK immigration controls fully. And, the 1 to 4 day process. But it's actually a prison barge off Staten Island. People can Google it, prison barge Staten Island. And, it works well there. But there are continually activists over there in the US who are saying it's not appropriate. Well, the prisoners there have access to all the welfare facilities that they need, the entertainment facilities they need, everything. It functions. And prisoners are a different category of society. They need to be treated as such. And I have no problem whatsoever putting them in a prison barge.
Henry, thank you very, very much. As ever, Henry Bolton, international security and border control expert. Now, police in Northern Ireland have warned that dissidents could attack their officers in Londonderry on Monday, which is the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Assistant Chief Constable Bobby Singleton said that the force has received strong intelligence that dissidents are planning to launch terror attacks. Tony Blair and Bertie Ahern were among the people who signed the Good Friday Agreement on April the 10th in 1998. The warning comes less than a fortnight after the terrorism threat level in Northern Ireland was raised from substantial to severe. Joining me now is Kenny Donaldson, who's from a group that helps innocent victims of terrorism in Northern Ireland. Thank you very, very much for joining me. Great to have you on at the show. What do you make of all of this noise, then, coming out at the moment of this increased risk to severe the terror threat and now some serious intelligence that would appear to indicate that a terror threat is actually very imminent?
Well, thank you, firstly, for having us on the show today, Patrick. Much appreciated. In terms of, yes, what we've saw in the last number of weeks, we've certainly saw an upsurge in the threat level, and that's on the back of the attempted murder of DCI John Caldwell of the Police Service of Northern Ireland in Omagh, the county town of Omagh. So we know that within Londonderry there are a multitude of dissident Republican organisations all vying for control within that city, almost in a mafia-esque style of running. So there is undoubtedly a lot of concern this weekend and into Monday that they could, I suppose, utilise the numbers that are going to be on the ground to create a situation of volatility, and then obviously take opportunity to take pot shots at members of the security forces and particularly the police.
I was just having a quick chat then, whilst you were talking, actually, about some of the serious, quite strong language that the police are using about this, actually. And, they appear to be saying to potential terrorists, really, that we know what you're planning on doing and we're not going to get sucked into it. But, why do you think we are seeing a bit of an upsurge in it now? Is it all about Brexit, or is it just coming back to the fore for other reasons?
Well, I think there's a number of things going on, and obviously today is obviously Good Friday, but the anniversary of the Belfast Agreement, and that's what we need to be clear as well, is the Belfast Agreement signed on Good Friday. The use of Good Friday is actually misusing what this day is all about. But in terms of the anniversary of the Belfast Agreement, these organisations were obviously anti that particular process, and they're wanting to make themselves visible and somehow relevant to the world at this particular time. They're aware that obviously President Biden is in town, although for a very short period of time, and all else that runs with that. But it has to be said that the threat from terrorism and from republicanism never went away. And in 1998, thereafter, there have been over 50 individuals murdered by the Provisional IRA but then there have been others whom have been murdered by these splinter organisations. And we're very uncomfortable as a group that essentially these individuals are essentially taking control of our streets once more. And I appreciate that the police force is in a very, very difficult situation in how to judge when to move in and when not to move in, because we do not want to see young officers, male or female, losing their life this Monday, or any other day for that matter.
Absolutely. And I know that you do a lot of work with helping innocent victims of terrorism. And could you just mind quickly giving a little bit of a statement, really, to the people who might be thinking of causing trouble, and that trouble, of course, can lead to the loss of life? Well, what would you say to those people?
Well, what I would say to them is that whenever a bullet is fired, it doesn't stop travelling. And that bullet murders the initial person, and the devastation that causes within a family, whether it's suicide, early heart attacks, the onslaught of cancers, which are trauma-related. It causes devastation. There is no death quite like that caused by another human being through premeditated murder. And sadly, we have faced that for well over 30 years in Northern Ireland over the period of the Troubles, and it's sporadically since. And we are in a very difficult and precarious position. The Belfast Agreement is somehow, for some, being celebrated, and there's a lot of back-slapping going on over the last number of weeks. We have a job of work, big time, to do in Northern Ireland still, if we're really going to augment a peace and have a type of society which has the abilities to be at ease going forward. There's a lot of work still to do.
Kenny, thank you very much. Kenny Donaldson there is Director of Services at the South East Fermanagh Foundation. Now, a Labour tweet has been branded appalling, nauseating and shameful by politicians from other parties, and actually some of their own as well. I'm going to speak to a Tory MP to find out what he thinks about it. And as it's Good Friday, I'm taking on a tough assignment. I'm doing it so you don't have to. I am going to be taste testing Easter eggs and finding out the best one and telling you which one is the best value for money. It might take some time. We've siphoned off half an hour of this show for me to just gorge in a pretty disgusting way on live television. It will no doubt be much better telly for me than it is for you. But that's always the case, isn't it? Right, I'll see you in a sec.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good evening, everybody. It's just about to go 5 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, which means I'm with you for the next hour. And what an hour it's going to be. Huge pushback to the Labour Party for a shameful and disgusting tweet, and a lie, actually, that they've dished out about Rishi Sunak. I'll tell you more on that very shortly. Do we have too many foreign doctors? A new report has emerged showing that we are importing more doctors than we are training our own. Is this an issue? If you think it is, tell me why. And it's the royals, yes, that's right, because King Charles predictably caved in and said he welcomes the inquisition into the royal family's links to the slave trade. Well, what's next? Well, it's obviously reparations, isn't it? So how long is it before you and I, as taxpayers, have to pay reparations to countries for the slave trade? But finally, I've been teasing this now for the best part of nearly 3 hours, and it's finally about to happen. I will be taste testing a whole variety of different Easter eggs. In case you're wondering, yes, I did have to pay for them myself. Patrick Christys here on GB News. OK, yes, all right, get your views coming in thick and fast. GBViews at gbnews.uk. There's a lot coming in about the old reparations story, whether or not you will be comfortable paying reparations. Do you think we have too many foreign doctors in our NHS? And has the Labour Party dragged politics into the gutter, or was it already there? Anyway, get your emails coming in. Right now, though, it's your headlines with Bethany.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 5. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom. The company which audits the accounts of the Scottish National Party has resigned. The accountancy firm Johnston Carmichael have made the decision after reviewing its client portfolio. It follows Nicola Sturgeon's husband, the former SNP chief executive, Peter Murrell, being arrested and then released without charge. Police are continuing to investigate his involvement in SNP finances. Police in Northern Ireland are warning their officers could be targeted by dissidents in Londonderry this Easter. That's ahead of a state visit by US President Joe Biden, who's arriving in Belfast on Tuesday. The PSNI says it's received strong intelligence that attacks are being planned for the holiday Monday. MI5 raised the terrorism threat level in the country to severe following the shooting of a senior detective, John Caldwell. Political commentator Nigel Nelson told us Northern Ireland has seen relative peace over the last quarter of a century, showing what an achievement the agreement was.
When it comes to Republican supporters, there are probably about as many in Northern Ireland now as there were during the Troubles. The new IRA doesn't have the capability of, say, launching mainland attacks. But they're obviously, as we can see by the various attacks they've carried out in Northern Ireland, they're hugely dangerous. So, yes, it is a tricky time, but it's a lot better than it was 25 years ago.
The Labour Party has stood by an advert that claims Rishi Sunak doesn't think child sex abusers should go to prison. Labour posted the video on Twitter, pitching itself as the party of law and order. It's drawn criticism, though, from MPs, with senior Tory ministers accusing Labour of a vile and desperate campaign strategy. But Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell told GB News the PM should take responsibility.
The digital graphic that's based on, it's like a skit, if you like, or a take on the types of graphics that the Prime Minister himself produces about his own policies, and he's become famous for producing these kind of graphics. And so it's a take on that. If it's personal in the sense that he's the guy who runs the country. He is the Prime Minister, and the book does stop with him.
A 16-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a 14-year-old girl died in a fire at a block of flats in East London yesterday. The girl, named locally as Tiffany, died at the scene and 5 others were injured, but have since been discharged from hospital. Emergency services were called to the blaze in Newham at around 5:30 p.m. It's being investigated as suspected arson. A 12-year-old boy has been charged with the murder of a woman who died after being hit by a car in Sheffield. 60-year-old Marcia Grant was hit by a car in the Green Hill area on Wednesday evening. South Yorkshire Police says the boy, who cannot be named for legal reasons, will appear before Sheffield Youth Court tomorrow. 2 million British holidaymakers are expected to head overseas this Easter weekend. Meanwhile, the Port of Dover is warning those travelling could face 2-hour delays. The ferry operator DFDS urged travellers to allow extra time to get through border control and check-in. Delays have been blamed on French officials carrying out extra checks, as well as stamping UK passports following Brexit. 2 Israeli women have been shot in an attack on their car in the occupied West Bank following a day of violence along the Lebanese and Gaza borders. An Israeli army video shows explosions on Hamas weapon production sites and tunnels. In retaliation for rocket attacks, it's blamed on the Islamist group. It comes amid mounting confrontation in Jerusalem during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, as well as the Jewish Passover holiday. The UK has appealed for de-escalation, with the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly saying both sides should negotiate. S Club 7's Paul Cattermole has passed away, aged 46, only weeks after the band announced a comeback tour. In a statement issued by the family and the group, it said there are no words to describe their deep sadness. He was found yesterday at his home in Dorset, but police say his death is not being treated as suspicious. The band had hits in the 2000s, including Bring It All Back and Reach. And Easter Sunday could be the warmest day of the year so far, with highs of up to 18 degrees. Temperatures could top 16 or 17 degrees Celsius in some parts of the UK today. But the Met Office is warning the sunshine this weekend could be short-lived, as rain is expected for most places on Bank Holiday Monday. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. It's back to Patrick.
OK, so let's get stuck into a big story for me today. There is a huge row taking place, which was caused by a controversial tweet, and it's now 2 tweets by Labour, which say that Rishi Sunak doesn't think that paedophiles should be jailed. It's been branded appalling, nauseating and shameful by MPs from other parties, but a shadow cabinet minister has refused to criticise the tweet. GB News viewers can see the social media post now, which has an image of Rishi Sunak smiling, with a signature, by the way, that says, "Do you think that adults convicted of sexually assaulting children should go to prison? Rishi Sunak doesn't." They've since doubled down on this, actually, by retweeting it again and also as well tweeting something else about the fact that Rishi Sunak, they're saying anyway, doesn't care about people who've got guns and want to use them should go to prison either, which, again, is a lie. The tweet says that under Tory rule, 4,500 adults convicted of child sexual assault have avoided jail. But this morning, GB News' presenter Stephen Dixon, joined by Dawn Neeson, called out Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell for the claims that her party was making.
Well, look, it's a graphic, a digital campaigning graphic. I didn't design it. I didn't, put it up there. But it's a digital graphic that's based on. It's like a skit, if you like, or a take on the types of graphics that the Prime Minister himself produces about his own policies, and he's become famous for producing these graphics.
No.
So
Lucy Powell,
it's a take on that.
This isn't a skit. Look, even Twitter itself has had to put a fact check on this, saying the tweet implies that the Prime Minister does not support prison sentences for sexual assaults against children. The current sentencing guidelines has a maximum sentence of 14 years imprisonment. You're implying Rishi Sunak does not think adults convicted of sexually assaulting children should go to prison. Now, that is just not accurate, is it?
But under his watch as Prime Minister, Under his government, over the last 13 years, we have seen thousands of people who have been convicted of serious child offences, sexual offences and child pornographic material offences, not receiving custodial sentences. And that is what is happening under his watch as Prime Minister. So if it's personal in the sense that he's the guy who runs the country. He is the Prime Minister, and the book does stop with him.
Yeah, lots to go at here. I mean, is it just absolute gutter politics? Does it open the door now for us to all have a look at Labour's record when it comes to this kind of behaviour? So you've got the Rotherham grooming gang scandal, just one of them, actually. Keir Starmer, of course, actually potentially being in a position to deal with sending paedophiles to prison and not doing so as head of the CPS. I'm joined now by GB News' political reporter, Catherine Forster. Catherine, thank you very much. Was this actually backed up by any policy from Labour to say, presumably, what, we will send every paedophile to prison?
Well, they're basically, the message is the Conservatives have made a terrible mess of law and order, of dealing with crime over the last 13 years, and we would do a much better job. Of course, we can't know that, can we? Because they've not been in power for a very long time. But this has upset people right across the political spectrum, from former Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell saying Labour's better than this, take it down, to Lee Anderson, Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party, saying how vile it is. And really, I mean, it's just blatantly, factually inaccurate, isn't it? Because they don't know what Rishi Sunak thinks, and I don't think anybody really, even if you can't stand the Prime Minister, would think that he genuinely doesn't think paedophiles should be locked up. And, you know, this isn't really on him. Sure, you could say this record's on 13 years of Tory failure if you want, but saying this is on Rishi Sunak, no, he's only been PM for 6 months, he's only been an MP for 7 years. He was in investment banking when these figures began to be collated, but... So Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecution, and as you say, the grooming gangs that there was so much talk about earlier in the week, many of those were happening in Labour areas, Labour-controlled councils, where people turned a blind eye because they didn't want to be considered racist. So I think Labour are on dodgy ground.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, thank you very, very much, Catherine. Catherine Forster, our political reporter. It's a little bit like, I think, Manchester United fans blaming Eric Ten Hag for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's results, isn't it, in this case? I'm joined now by Conservative MP David Morris, MP for Morecambe and Lonsdale. David, look, great to see you. Thank you very much for this. Do you think it's a bit of a disgrace, this, that Labour had decided to tweet out something saying that Rishi Sunak doesn't care about whether or not paedophiles go to prison?
It's desperate, isn't it? Look, Patrick, you and I both know what the real score is here. They've got nothing to talk about, so they talk about nonsense. The reality is Sunak wasn't even a Member of Parliament when Starmer sat on the Sentencing Council that actually came up with the guidelines for the judges to actually sentence these sex offenders. I mean, how does he explain here in the area that you're from, and I'm actually MP for, a Labour councillor has just narrowly avoided going to a former Labour councillor, narrowly avoided going to prison for grooming a 14-year-old boy who turned out to be a policeman on the internet. Now, you know, that caused a by-election. That's just come out. That's literally, and we're talking literally within the past few days, that's come out, but this has been going on for years. So how does Keir Starmer square that circle? And this guy as well, he was actually shortlisted to run against me in this seat and shortlisted in Barrow. So how do you work that out?
I mean, also, it wasn't exactly followed up by any Labour Party policy, was it? I mean, they've not come out, as far as I can tell, and said, oh right, well, there you go. If you've got any kind of proclivity towards children whatsoever, under Labour, we will lock you up. It's just saying, hypothetically, we would have done more than the Tories, despite the fact that they haven't, when they've had the chance to.
Well, Patrick, the truth is Keir Starmer's got more skin in this game than anybody. So to chuck a spanner at the Prime Minister in this fashion is what it is. It's just desperate. You know, I mean, look, the Jimmy Savile case, right? They didn't have enough to prosecute him, according to Savile, but they had literally zero evidence to spend 30 million quid on Tory paedophiles in Dolphin Square. Now, come on, this is the politics of the gutter, literally the worst. And to follow it up with a second tweet, it's absolutely abhorrent. You know, Labour should be hanging their heads in shame. This is going back to the Momentum days, and we all know how bad that got.
Well, the one issue that really did make me laugh about all of this was that he's managed to unite the momentum lot against him with this. Actually, even they are now saying, no, we're drawing the line on all of this, I'm afraid. But do you reckon that the Tories are guilty of anything like this, though? Do you think that there is anything that could be said about the Conservative Party? If Keir Starmer's dragged it into the gutter, were we already in the gutter, David?
No, we weren't. I mean, the reality is this. Sentencing is actually done externally from the government. The government put the guidelines down as far as legislation goes, but it's actually taken out of their hands when it comes down to the actual sentencing council, which Keir Starmer sat on. Now, that is where the real blame lies. So it's okay him saying all of this about the Conservative government. It doesn't matter what colour of government you are, that would still be the same process. But he actually sat on that council that gave the guidelines. And more to the point, Rishi Sunak wasn't even an MP then. So, I think Starmer's got some serious answering to do.
Indeed. Look, David, thank you very much. It's always an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and good luck to you. Take care. David Morris there is Conservative MP for Morecambe and Lunesdale. Now, look, it's another big story, this, for me. And yesterday, I covered the news that the royal family had agreed to cooperate with research into the historical links between the British monarchy and the transatlantic slave trade. I said at the time, and, I hate to bang on about it, but I was right, that people would jump on the bandwagon, and sure enough, yes, they have, because it wasn't just going to end. The second you open a door to people who want things like massive, unaffordable environmental change, or things like reparations to the slave trade, the second you open the door, people pile on through it, and there's nothing that you can ever do, short of dismantling the monarchy and turning us into a republic or whatever, that would actually please people, OK? So King Charles, what's he done? He's just wandered straight into the trap, hasn't he? And he said, yeah, OK, all right, I welcome an investigation into the historic links between the monarchy and the slave trade. Said historic links appeared to date back to a letter from 1689, where it showed that King William III was given around the equivalent of around £1,000 worth of shares in a slave trading company. Right, so there we go. So now there has to be an investigation into that from 1689. And then on top of it now, bingo, the National Reparations Commission of Grenada wants the royals to hold talks about paying reparations. What does King Charles do? Well, he doesn't rule out the possibility of paying reparations. Right, great, OK. So now absolutely every single country that we have ever touched is going to want reparations. And who's going to have to pay for that? Well, possibly all of us, if indeed it does come about. I'm joined now by the former royal butler, Grant Harold. Grant, thank you very, very much. How do you feel about this? I mean, look, I obviously love King Charles and I love the monarchy and everything, but I do wish he'd stop putting his foot in it with things like this and just tell people to back off.
Good afternoon, Patrick. No, do you know, sometimes I hear things like you and I don't understand it, and I don't know if it's advisors or where he gets sometimes the information comes from, because it's difficult, because with this kind of thing, as you've said, you're opening the doors. I mean, I understand, of course, like everybody, I understand the kind of background, but we're talking about things that happened hundreds of years ago. And, Patrick, the only way I can I was thinking about it, what's the equivalent for me would be like me saying, my ancestors in Scotland 400, 300 years ago, there was things that happened up there that shouldn't have happened, and then suddenly I want an investigation, which is just, it's crazy. We've got to kind of move on with life, and we can't keep living in the past. But unfortunately, as you said, the King's obviously welcomed this study. I believe it's by a university and obviously historic royal palaces, so maybe he felt that that's quite safe. But as you said, it opens up a...
The thing is, it was naive. It was, if he thought it was safe, it was naive, because The Guardian are all over this, and that will prompt a lot of the left-wing press to get all over it. And then in response, it prompts the right-wing press to get all over it. On the front of the Mail, royals hit by new payout demands over slavery links. And here you go, it all builds up. And it is a very emotive issue for a lot of people. Do you think that there is a bit of a tightrope to be walked with the royal family now? I think in this current day and age, especially of cancel culture and of people, I think, hating anyone who's got a bit of wealth and status, the royal family, I think, maybe feel a bit squiffy about the fact that, the public pays for quite a bit of them. Do you think he's got to tread carefully? Do you think he's got to tread carefully here and not seem as though he's going to end up getting cancelled because he doesn't want to just go and give millions of pounds to Grenada?
No, you're right, and there is this fine line. You're quite right with that comment there. It's not just about the royal family. Anybody kind of does well, sadly, other people, certain people don't like that, and you have people kind of wanting to go for them because they're doing well, because they've got wealth, because they've got certain things, which I think is really sad. I think for the king, he's very aware. I mean, he is aware that it's a very fine line. I mean, the reality is his late mother was hugely popular. That's a known fact. I think with popularity polls, he was slightly less, and obviously he wants people to like him, obviously. And the reality is with life is you can't force people to like you.
But they're not going to, Grant.
It's a very fine line.
This is the annoying thing, is they're not going to. He's trying, I don't want to seem like I'm criticising the king too much, but he's trying to appeal to people who are never going to like him. You've got this, really big environmental lobby who, despite the fact that he's been a known environmentalist for basically all of his life, they're never going to like him, I think mainly, as far as I can tell, because he lives in a big house, which is nuts. And then you've got this, the anti-monarchy law and the slavery lobbies, that they're never going to like him no matter what he does. And so part of me thinks that it might be better for him to just keep stum on these things. Do you worry that he's going to try to go woke and with it might go broke?
Do you know, it's a tricky one because, as you know, Patrick, I knew him really well, and he's one of the kindest men that I've met. And I think, from his point of view, he does want everything to go well. He wants everyone to be happy. He wants to do the right thing. And as we've seen and heard over the years, it hasn't always been like that, whether that just be advisors or his decision. And, this is the dangerous part, is how do you close the door on this, and can it become a dangerous situation going forward? And I'm sure he'll be watching it. I mean, he'll be aware that it's been discussed. He'll be aware of the views and comments, and he'll probably want it to die down. But at the same time, Patrick, I'm guessing that he can't be seen to not want to support a study, because then people will say he doesn't want to support a study because obviously there's something to hide. So I think for him, he can't win. He's damned if he's do, he's damned if he's don't. It's one of those situations, isn't it? Sadly.
Can I ask, Grant? You had many, many years around the royal household, and did you ever experience anything that you thought might have been a backward view or a derogatory view towards people of different races, ethnicities, towards people who were in the Commonwealth, or anything like that? Anything to indicate to you that there was some real proper education re-education that needs to take place in the royal family?
No, the thing about the king, from my memory with him, is he's somebody that treats everybody equally, and he's a believer in all faiths. He's obviously now head of the Commonwealth. There was never any, the way he is as a person, it's just not in his makeup to be like that. He's just somebody that is just a kind human being and treats everybody the same way. And so I think that's what's really difficult, is that when people kind of get angry or get frustrated with him, I kind of think it's awkward, because I'm one of the few that was lucky enough to be around him and get to know him. Many others don't have that opportunity, and it's easy to make decisions about people. But no, I mean, when I was around him, I found him a really good boss and treated everybody the same way.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, Grant, thank you very, very much. Always an absolute pleasure. And can I just say as well, your backgrounds, wherever you are always absolutely sublime. This will be totally lost on our radio listeners now, but I'm looking at yet another stellar background. Where are you?
It's just my home. It looks a little bit... In fact, the other day, somebody asked me what was Buckingham Palace. It's not Buckingham Palace, it's just my home.
Well, it could be. It could be. I think the frame on one of your pictures there costs more than my entire flat. Grant, thank you very much. Former royal butler there, Grant Harold, absolute legend. Right, OK, now, moving on. The famous artist Picasso died 50 years ago today, but he's now at risk of being cancelled. I can't believe I'm about to say this. The Me Too movement is coming for Picasso, the artist who died 50 years ago. I'm Patrick Christys, this is GB News, and I think I've lost the will.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Something remarkable has just happened in the break, ladies and gentlemen. Just quickly before I go to this story, which is you are not being deceived by your eyes. So, yes, the famous artist Picasso, who died 50 years ago today, is about to be cancelled by the Me Too movement. I cover a lot of the hard-hitting, controversial, fast-paced, breaking news topics on this show. And the door swung open in the break there. Someone comes running in. I was like, oh, grief, what could this be? This could be anything. Patrick, we've got some facts for you. Someone... Because I'm going to be doing an Easter egg taste test later, some poor so-and-so out there has decided to compile me a booklet of totally random Easter egg facts. Of all of the news topics that we ever cover here, the fact file has come through on Easter eggs. So did you know that the UK has the 7th highest consumption of chocolate in the world? I've got all of this useless guff coming your way. The Maya celebrated a festival of chocolate, so it's not just all about Jesus, people, when you're eating that Easter egg. Oh, this is fantastic. Keep me entertained for days. Right, yes. Anyway, moving on. The famous artist Picasso died 50 years ago today, but even in death, he's not safe from the clutches of cancel culture. He's come increasingly under fire following the Me Too movement. The sculptor who pioneered Cubism supposedly categorised women into goddesses and doormats, and how very dare he. And many regard Picasso as an abuser of women, leading to him being a renowned misogynist in the feminist art world. Joining me now is political commentator Jess Gill. Thank you very much. Jess, now, look, obviously we do not want to in any way, shape or form condone any kind of derogatory behaviour towards women whatsoever, but he has been dead 50 years and he's an artist. And, you know, why is he being cancelled?
I mean, let's put it this way. It's not about standing up for women or protecting survivors. It's a blatant attempt to remove these significant figures who represent the glories of Western civilization, remove them from the history books. The Guardian said it themselves, straight from the horse's mouth. I'm pulling up from an article here. It's the ultimate, they seem as the ultimate example of problematic white guys clogging up the artistic canon. They simply want to erase straight white men from our culture and from our history, and quite frankly it's disgusting that they're using the experiences and they're using the excuse of standing up for women, standing up for sexual survivors, sexual abuse survivors, to do that.
I mean, I am waiting for it to emerge that some of the people who now own Picasso's artwork are women, and if his legacy is cancelled, that will knock millions off of the price that said women could make by selling his artwork, which I would find quite ironic. Do you think there is a tendency now to needlessly look back at historical figures and see them through the lens of today's norms and values?
I mean, only for those who don't benefit this progressive left-wing agenda. I mean, Karl Marx was an awful person. I'm quite sure he was an alcoholic. He was horrible to those around him. And they seem to be completely fine with that. They seem to be completely fine off the atrocities of people they support. And I'm not saying that we should, celebrate Picasso. I'm not going to take relationship advice from Picasso the same way I wouldn't take maths lessons from Diane Abbott. But you can appreciate his artwork, and I think that's why people appreciate him, because of his amazing artwork. He's a sign of the amazingness of our culture, and I think he should be celebrated for that.
Yeah, this is part of it, isn't it? I just can't help but wonder whether or not people would have something better to do. Why on earth, all of a sudden now, we decided, Picasso... Of all of the issues facing people today, you look at the convictions for rape and sexual assault on women now, going on right now today. You look at what's been going on in the Met Police. You look at all of this stuff that women are facing issues with left, right and centre in society today, the grooming gangs issue, etc. I think you think, right, do we have to now be focusing on an artist who's been dead for 50 years and making sure that kids don't learn about him in school? Will he have trigger warnings underneath every single Picasso painting? You don't think we should be focusing on what's going on today?
Absolutely, it's completely insulting to the victims of sexual abuse and domestic violence and all these things that women face. And this is why so many women feel so disillusioned with the feminist movement. There are real issues like rape, domestic violence, all this stuff which women do face. But instead of focusing on that, they're focusing on virtue signalling, of protecting women who have already experienced this stuff. And yes, if these things happened, they obviously need justice. But I think when there's women facing these things, as you said, the grooming guys, they seem to be so quick to avoid that. These are the same people who are so quick to point, Scott, with the Rishi Sunak thing about, children being abused. Yeah, it's just complete virtue signalling. It's so stupid, it's so ridiculous, and it's so insulting towards the victims.
Absolutely. Jess, thank you very much. As ever, great stuff. Jess Gill there, who's political commentator, who's just discussing the fact that Picasso, believe it or not, is about to be cancelled by the hashtag #MeToo movement. Can't help but feel as though you're 50 years too late with that, because that's how long he's been dead. Just want to hit you very quickly. I've been given an Easter egg fact file here, ladies and gentlemen. I am going to be taste testing Easter eggs. Did you know that it wasn't until the 1800s that the first solid chocolate Easter egg appeared, and that was in Germany? Get a load of this. Scientists have proven why Easter eggs taste better than normal chocolate, and some of it is to do with the shape. So there you are. Look, I've got all of this stuff coming your way, you lucky, lucky people. If that doesn't make you cling on over the break, then nothing will. Anyway, more foreign doctors have joined the health service last year than the number of medical students who enrolled on courses. So why aren't there more British doctors? And does it actually matter as well? And yes, it's that egg-sighting time of year. But which eggs should you be putting in your basket? I'm going to be telling you which ones I think are best for value and which ones taste the better in a hard-hitting news segment that involves me gorging on chocolate. To the point, I think, until I get diabetes. Anyway, there we go. Now it's your headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Patrick, thank you. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom at 5:32. Opposition politicians in Scotland are urging the SNP to be fully transparent about its finances. After it emerged the firm which audits the party's accounts has resigned. Johnston Carmichael says it made the decision after reviewing its client portfolio. Earlier this week, the former SNP chief executive, Peter Murrell, who is also Nicola Sturgeon's husband, was arrested by police investigating the party's finances. He was released without charge pending further investigation. Russia has charged a US journalist with espionage. Evan Gershkovich, who works for the Wall Street Journal, is accused of trying to obtain Russian military secrets on behalf of Washington. He pleaded not guilty earlier this week and maintains he was working as a journalist. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says he was caught red-handed, but President Joe Biden has described the claims of espionage as ridiculous and demanded his release. Police in Northern Ireland are warning their officers could be targeted by dissidents in Londonderry this Easter. That's ahead of a state visit by US President Joe Biden, who's arriving in Belfast on Tuesday. The PSNI says it's received strong intelligence that attacks are being planned for Bank Holiday Monday. MI5 raised the terrorism threat level in the country to severe following the shooting of senior detective John Caldwell. S Club 7's Paul Cattermole has passed away, aged 46, only weeks after the pop group announced a comeback tour. He was found at his home in Dorset yesterday. Police say there were no suspicious circumstances. In a statement issued by the family and the group, it said, "There are no words to describe their deep sadness." You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and TuneIn. This is GB News.
Now, to the controversy surrounding Nike's decision to use a transgender influencer, man, to promote its female sports clothing range. So trans star Dylan Mulvaney, who people will be able to see on video there if you're watching us on YouTube or television, of course, is the latest face of the brand's female sports clothing wear. But Nike's decision has come in for plenty of criticism. I mean, it's... Look, yeah. Joining me now is Kelly J. Keane. He's a women's rights campaigner, and there's rather a lot I actually want to talk to Kelly J. Keane about, but we'll start with this. So, yeah, your initial take on the fact that that individual called Dylan is now the rather interesting face of Nike's women's clothing range.
Well, I think Nike is basically saying, men, if you want to wear women's intimate garments, just do it. I think that's the campaign.
All right, what's wrong with it though, Kelly? Go on. So why shouldn't Nike use Dylan, who was born a man, as part of their campaign?
I just think it's just another in the numerous encroachments on women's space by men, and this time it's, you know, they're not just wanting to see us in our underwear, they're actually wanting to wear it. So I just think it's just consistent, persistent insulting messages to women, which is basically the best women to wear Nike sportswear are actually men. It's just unthinkable what went on in that room where everyone said, hey, who should we have as the latest person to model our garment? Should it be a female sports person? Maybe it could be any one of the many celebrated women in sports. But instead of that, they said, no, let's just get a TikTok influencer who's a man.
Does it tie in with some people's ideas that being trans is quite literally fashionable?
I think it might. I think we just have to stick to the really fundamental message, which is men can't be women and we don't want them in our space. And I hope that many women who previously purchased Nike sportswear, you may be shocked that I don't buy sportswear myself, but those women that do, I hope they pick another brand, because we have to start making our voices heard, and that basically means money for these.
Kelly, would you urge women to boycott Nike now, or any brand that advertises their wares to people like Dylan, using people like Dylan to advertise women's items?
Of course I would, but I just don't think that works, Patrick. I don't think women do that. Unfortunately, as we both know, there's a lot of women that go along with this nonsense. I would just like to see that, capitalism, like woke capitalism, actually unfortunately works. For all those people on the woke side of politics who claim to be against capitalism, it is the most capitalist movement I've ever seen. And certainly in 2023, I mean, what's next? Are we going to get somebody with a hairy chest wearing a Wonder Bra saying, "Hello, boys," on billboards?
Yeah, I mean, I believe there's an advertising campaign with that already lined up on it, and I was approached, but unfortunately my chest wasn't hairy enough. But Kelly, can I just ask, just quick, while I've got you, I mean, how are you? Because you, through absolute complete and utter bravery, managed to expose the lunacy of a lot of the trans politics out there and the pure, complete and utter misogyny of it, and the attempt at cancellation and the vile, disingenuous political... I mean, the whole lot of it you managed to expose on a recent trip down under, didn't you? Are you all right after all of this?
I am, actually. I'm really good. I've got a really solid family. I'm actually in an echoey room right now because I'm on holiday. My husband decided to take us all away for a week so I could just get over some of the sort of craziness of it. But yeah, I mean, look, my events have always, everything I've done is always twofold. One, it's about facilitating women, enabling them to speak. We're at Speaker's Corner again at Reformers Tree on Sunday. But it's all about letting women speak. And the flip side is that we reveal the misogyny of those that really don't want women to speak. And down in Australia and New Zealand, that included the immigration minister, the prime minister, and various first ministers throughout Australia. So,
well, look, can I just very quickly, because I'm going to have to get going in a second, but I wanted to say this to you while I've got you in person in a way, which is I was having a chat with numerous different women recently who were saying because of you going out at the front, as it were, and facing a lot of this stuff, you are clearing a way for women who feel exactly like you about it to have the confidence to talk about it on news outlets and in the media and on social media and be able to front up to a lot of the hate and the pushback that they get because they feel as though they've got you there as a trailblazer. So I just wanted to let you know, I'm sure you're already aware of this, but you are doing fantastic work, so thank you very much. Kelly J. Keane there, that's all right, anytime. So, yes, who is just an absolute Wonder Woman, as far as I'm concerned. But, anyway, moving on. Junior doctors are going on a 4-day strike next week, which one hospital says will leave emergency departments utterly overwhelmed. So we're going to be talking about all of that. And, crucially, yes, have I got time for a quick Easter egg fact? Someone gave me a dossier here. I will be taste testing a load of Easter eggs later. Apparently, here we go. Apparently the size of an Easter egg can dictate its taste as well. And Easter does have its roots, obviously the eggs themselves, in Christian traditions. But we all knew this. Anyway, I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Nike did not comment on the story that I read out before, despite the fact that we asked them, and we can all agree that was well worth me reading out. Now, welcome back. Now to a concerning report from Migration Watch on the NHS. They've revealed that more foreign doctors joined the health service last year than the number of medical students who enrolled on courses. Let's go through some of the report's key findings, shall we? More than 12,000 doctors joined NHS England from abroad last year. They outnumbered the amount of British students who signed up to medicine courses. A massive 46% of doctors who joined the NHS in 2022 were foreign nationals. And less than half of the people in the UK who applied for places on medicine courses were successful. So the news comes as junior doctors are due to begin a 4-day walkout over pay at 7 a.m. on Tuesday. Health leaders are warning that patient safety will be at risk. It has led some people to wonder whether or not health unions in this country actually really want us to have more domestically trained doctors, because if they did, would that actually drive down the wages? Joining me now is Health and Social Affairs Editor at the Sunday Express, Lucy Johnson. Lucy, thank you very much for joining us. Is it a problem that we are importing more doctors than we are training?
Well, the NHS would topple without the doctors that we have from overseas. But there are problems with, there's a sort of moral argument, which is that we are taking in a lot of doctors from developing countries who have their own problems with doctor shortages, and that's, you have to question the ethics of that. And the other issue that this throws up is that the government's put a cap on the number of doctors that it can train here in the UK. And that means that we can't, that very, very bright, brilliant students who may get all their grades, get A stars, are being turned away in medical school, so they can't actually train our own homegrown doctors. So that there are two issues there, but, people have every right to come to this country and to work. That shouldn't be a problem. And plenty of, the doctors from elsewhere are just as good as ours,
I just wonder if it's actually saving us money, because then we're not paying to actually train them, are we?
Well, the problem is the government would argue that it costs a lot of money to train a doctor. So, and that's perhaps one of the reasons why they put a cap on the number of training places. I think it's about 10,000 a year. I think even Jeremy Hunt, when he was running the Health Select Committee, he wanted to increase the number of training places for junior doctors, but that hasn't happened by about 5,000. So we have got a lot of bright and very, very desperate people who want to get into medical school from the UK, but they just can't do it, and that is a problem.
Look, thank you very, very much. I'm sorry it's a bit short and sweet, but we're a bit pressed for time. And Lucy, you'll be pleased to know that I am making way so that I have more time to taste a larger variety of Easter eggs. OK, so it's important business, this, Lucy. Lucy Johnson there, who is the Health and Social Affairs Editor at the Sunday Express. On that, I'm just going to dip back into my fact file here very quickly. Did you know that 90 million chocolate Easter eggs are made every single year? I'll be doing my best to eat as many of them as possible in a matter of moments. But time for one more before I get stuck into the food. Mamma mia! Oh, great, they make me read anything. Would you believe that Italy is trying to ban English words and is threatening offenders with a fine of up to, what? 100,000 euros. It's part of their drive to protect Italy against what they call as Anglicization. They are copying France, where the authorities release a list of banned English words every single year. With me now is Dr. Alex Baratta, who's a sociolinguist at the University of Manchester. So what are some of these words? Why do the Italians care about the fact that some of them are going to use English words?
Well, I think if we look at it from a broad perspective, language is very often not just about language. It can be political. And it's a stand-in. It's as a proxy for identity, tied to nationality, ethnicity, class, gender, and so on. And so I don't think Italians necessarily would say, I don't like British pronunciation. They might, but I think it's much deeper than that. I think it's about maybe seeing their language being infiltrated by English. English is a lingua franca. It's a global language. And for some, maybe it's getting too much exposure at the risk of, losing the flavor of their native language. But this, of course, is societal reality. I've always said linguistic reality is much more objective. Language is always changing. English has borrowed so many words, including Italian words. When we borrow words, we're not going to give them back. And so we're going to take on new flavors, new pronunciations. Bruschetta is the Italian pronunciation, but Brits, maybe some Aussies, Americans, say bruschetta. even if that is determined to be an error, once it becomes widespread and used by a large segment of the population, errors become innovations.
Absolutely.
We can't change this.
No, well, we can't. It is part of just culture and it all moving on, I suppose, isn't it? In a way, I must say, Dr. Alex, part of me quite respects what they're doing. I mean, I personally have no desire to try to push my particular language on any other nation. Certainly not the Italians. I think it's got a beautiful language itself. And I quite admire them standing up for their own language, actually. I think maybe we should do a bit more of that over here. Dr. Alex, thank you very much. Dr. Alex Barata there, or is it Barata? Who knows? He's a sociolinguist at the University of Manchester. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is the moment that we've all been waiting for. I've certainly been looking forward to it all day. I'm going to eat a boatload of chocolates. And here to help me do this is the wonderful Emily Carver, who's going to be doing the show
Your
next.
glamorous assistant.
Yes, my glamorous assistant, Emily Carver. And as we were able to see, what we've decided to do here is get an array of different brands. OK, I'm going to taste test them for you. And I'm also going to tell you to see if we can guess which one cost the most. So just quickly, before we do go to a guest who's going to help me with this. So I've got a Toblerone one here, OK? And I've got a Lindt one. I've got a Hershey's one. This one's just for props. There was two of those, but I ate one earlier. I've got an M&S own brand, and it is a, let me have a look. Oh, it's hot cross bun style one. And I have got a Terry's chocolate orange one here. I want to know from you which one you think cost the most, which one you think was the cheapest. The answer might surprise you. But first, I've got David Greenwood-Hay, who has got a great job. He's an international chocolate consultant.
Woohoo.
Legend. So is David with me now? David joins me? Yes, there he is. Yeah. Wow, good stuff, David. So what am I looking for here on the palate? I mean, what makes Easter eggs taste better than any other form of chocolate?
There's a whole range of things. One of them is nostalgia, because you remember really fond memories of being a child and doing Easter egg hunts, and you only get them once a year, so that is quite a treat. The other thing, chocolate manufacturers know that round objects taste sweeter and creamier in our mouths, so Easter eggs are round, therefore they taste sweeter and creamier.
Very quickly, this is, by the way, the M&S hot cross bun. Well, how did you get into chocolate?
I've been a chef since I was 15, so I've had 50 years in kitchens, and then went working for food manufacturers doing chocolate. I can see you read all the notes on tasting chocolate.
Fantastic. Oh, did you know that the recommended daily amount is 2,000 calories a day for a man, and about 1,500 for women. Right, OK. Look, Emily and I are going to taste a couple of these. Look, thank you very much. Sorry it was short and sweet, but I'm going to have to have you back on. Right, OK, so I can report back that the M&S hot cross bun chocolate, bingo, very good. Emily, what have you got there?
Well, I've got the Toblerone one. Right,
crack it open, smash it, let's get on. Yeah, OK. So, now, ladies and gentlemen, this own brand M&S, so you think maybe if it's own brand, it's going to be less money. This, £9. That, I'd argue that's money well spent, £9. Wasn't the most expensive one.
I mean, it's not a bargain, but it's not horrendous.
No.
Some of these are more expensive than that.
Wasn't the most expensive one. The Terry's chocolate orange.
That is nice.
The Toblerone chocolate. Now, but I'd like to disqualify this because it's not... Well, I say that, but the hot cross bun is not okay. Anyway.
Is it an egg?
Now, Toblerone. Anyone guess how much it was? What do you reckon? How much do you think that cost?
I think it's going to be expensive because it's Toblerone. Anyone knows how much a Toblerone is when they go on holiday.
Yeah, you'd be wrong about that. It was £3.50 for Toblerone one, so there you go.
£3.50?
Hershey's, widely regarded as absolutely bang-average American tripe of chocolate. This is the cheapest one, in case you're wondering, but with good reason, I think, ladies and gentlemen, because I had a little nibble of this before. Firstly, it's so thin you can see through it. It's basically not an egg.
I feel sorry for people at home if they bought this egg for their family, friends.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it does come with Hershey bars. But it's just come with Hershey bars. The only problem with Hershey bars is that you wouldn't give them to your worst enemy. And so, now... Yeah, there we go. So Lindt, this is, I mean, they're master chocolatiers.
That's almost traditional, isn't it, now?
Lindt is, you know someone loves you.
The Lindt Easter egg.
You know someone loves you if they give you Lindt.
Is it for me?
It is, yes, there you go, there you are. You can have a Lindt bunny.
Thank
now, this
you.
was the most expensive. It came in at £11. It was tiny, thank you very much. Someone will clip that up. But yeah, so there we go. Basically, this is the most expensive one, £9, but you get a Lindt bunny with it, and actually it tastes lovely. So anyway, that's enough from me.
Other brands are available.
Other brands are available. Look, Emily Carver will be up next, covering for Jubes & Co. And I hope you all have a wonderful Easter, everybody. I've been Patrick Christys. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. And I will see you on the other side of this chocolate mountain, presumably after I've died of a massive heart attack. Ugh. Oh, God. Let go, everybody. Have a great Easter. Have a great Easter.
Hello again. The fine weather's going to continue for many for a few days yet, with some further warm sunshine for most of us, but things are going to turn a bit more unsettled as we head towards Easter Monday. The reason for the settled conditions at the moment is this area of high pressure. That's bringing largely fine weather across the bulk of the UK at the moment, and is also keeping these weather fronts out in the west at bay, but they are going to arrive later this weekend. Taking a closer look as we go through Friday evening, and we are going to see more cloud pushing in across eastern parts, and here we could see some outbreaks of rain through the night and perhaps some hill fog too. Further west, clearer skies. As a result, a touch of frost is possible in prone spots, and watch out for a few patches of mist and fog, most likely towards more southern areas. As we head through Saturday itself then, and yes, it's going to be another largely fine day for the bulk of the UK. The best of the sunshine will be across central and western parts of England and Wales, and perhaps western Scotland too. Further east, I'm expecting a bit more cloud around, and there'll be a few outbreaks of rain here too. Even still though, I'm expecting some sunshine to break through, and in the sunshine, it's not going to feel too bad at all. Temperatures a little bit higher than today, so we could see highs around 16 or 17 Celsius. As we go through the end of the day tomorrow, we are going to see a bit more cloud across parts of Northern Ireland, and the winds are going to strengthen here as well ahead of this front that's gradually starting to push its way in from the west. As a result, we could see some outbreaks of rain across parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland as we go through Saturday night into Sunday. Otherwise, and there'll be perhaps a bit more cloud than we've seen through some recent nights, so temperatures not falling quite as low as they have done recently. As we look through Sunday then, and yes, we'll have some outbreaks of rain towards the far west-northwest of the UK. Otherwise, for many, it is going to again be a generally dry day. Yes, there'll be more cloud around than recently, but I am still expecting some decent sunshine and temperatures similar to of late, so still feeling pleasantly warm for most. There is then more unsettled weather to come later in the weekend.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that